Hello, I'm Alex from Ani Best Recaps, and I'd love to tell you a story. We stand before the dark and foreboding castle of the Demon Lord, where a group of adventurers finally arrives at the gate after discovering the enemy leader's location. The group's mage believes that Yuga is capable of leading the team to victory and calls his companions together for this final battle. With that, the castle gate opens and red eyes can be seen, along with ghastly groans echoing from inside. Yet without showing a trace of fear, our protagonist enters with his friends, and they immediately come face to face with one of the Demon Lord's bodyguards, a minion who displays an unsettling confidence despite being vastly outnumbered. The mage casts a spell at him, but the demon cancels it with incredible ease. Next, a warrior steps forward and unleashes several sword strikes, but the opponent is fast enough to evade each attack and then kick the swordsman back into place. Then a companion casts a support spell on the leader to increase his power, and he feels ready to attack with his Excalibur skill. At that moment, the demon counters with Infinite Darkness, a spell so strong it instantly devours the attack and explodes over the adventurers. After taking such overwhelming damage, the young man wonders if this is the end as he slowly closes his eyes, and I have to say the anime already caught my attention here because of the sheer power gap. Meanwhile, the demon approaches the group and is left speechless by the beauty of the priestess. At that moment, one of his subordinates asks their captain if they should finish off the enemies and the superior jolts, remembering he had ordered the minions to stay hidden. The three underlings notice their leader staring strangely at the girl, but he insists he is only deciding what to do with the four adventurers. The minions assumed they would eliminate the humans, but the captain instead orders them to dump the enemies in a nearby village, and as the beautiful priestess is carried outside, the demon feels the sadness of parting with such a woman. A month later, one of the Demon Lord's right-hand men asks Yoki how many times those unbearable heroes have tried to get past him, and the captain answers Lord Zakal that he has been challenged exactly 13 times. Zakal says those heroes are worthless if they keep losing to someone like him, then bursts out laughing, triggering laughter from the other demons around him. The Demon Lord asks why the Guardian hasn't killed the heroes, and he explains that useless people like them aren't worth the effort. If that's the case, the Lord says he'll let the subordinates handle it, but knowing they won't be able to defeat the heroes and not wanting to kill that beautiful girl, the guard promises he'll take care of it. Upon leaving the throne room, the man thinks to himself that the heroes' lives will be in danger if he spares them again. Ironically, the captain is strong enough to hold off the entire quartet alone, but they certainly have enough power to defeat the Demon Lord. In any case, while he reflects on the situation, the entire world is being controlled by his master, and it's best to resolve this before those humans truly find themselves in hot water. The next day, the group returns to challenge the Guardian again, calling Raven to attack with a new strategy. The leader forms a duo to corner the opponent, but the enemy is too strong to restrain and ends up slamming both of them into the wall. Seeing that things look bad, the priestess runs to heal her allies and tells Makana to hold the foe off as long as possible. To make sure the demon stays away, the sorceress fires her strongest spells, but none of them work, giving the unwanted guests a small break. The antagonist waits for the girl to heal her friends before delivering a threatening speech. Once back on his feet, the hero asks Cecilia to buff him, and once she does, he uses Excalibur again, this time gathering a far greater amount of energy in hopes of finally defeating the biggest obstacle. After the skill detonates on top of the demon, the boy watches closely to see the result, but as the smoke clears completely unharmed, the guard asks when these humans will finally understand they cannot defeat him. The hero replies that they must bring down the Demon Lord at any cost. In that case, the Guardian demands they leave the priestess in the castle, and then he'll let the others pass. Naturally, the leader refuses, but Makana tries to convince him otherwise because they have no chance against this man, and as difficult as it is, someone must choose between the life of one girl and the life of the entire world. Hearing this, the young man becomes anxious, trying to think of a solution, but Cecilia tells her friends to go ahead and sacrifices herself for the group. The protagonist promises to come back for her later, and the demon keeps his word, opening the door for the heroes to pass. When the three leave, the priestess knows she doesn't come close to matching this enemy, but she promises to fight to the end as she fires a holy laser. The demon absorbs the attack and quickly raises his hands in surrender, saying his name to the human. She asks why anyone would introduce themselves to someone they are about to kill, and he explains that if he really wanted to kill her, he would have done it long ago. In truth, he gathers courage to confess that he fell in love with her from the first moment he saw her, and so he invites her on a date. Terrified by this bombshell, Cecilia screams and apologizes to the man. Thinking that was a no, the captain concludes he has no chance and starts planning his self-immolation for later. Meanwhile, assuming the demon is pretending to be nice so he can strike from behind, the priestess tries to attack first as he turns around, but she gives up when she notices that he truly isn't trying to resist. She asks him why, and he says there's no reason left to live after being rejected by the one he loved. Besides, even if he stays alive, all he has to do is remain inside that room to protect the Lord, and he doesn't even have permission to go out. Cecilia accuses the demon of lying, because all demons are cruel, including their leader. The boy explains that he may look like a monster, but he was actually reincarnated from another world and is human on the inside. Since that's the case, the girl asks why he serves the demon lord if he could defeat him with his vast power. Our guy explains that if he did that, he would be appointed as the next lord, something he doesn't want. Because of that, he spends his life confined every day with no chance to do anything. What he wanted was to put an end to his own pathetic life, but that changed when he met the priestess, who gave him the feeling of what it truly means to be alive for the first time. However, now that he has been rejected, he has once again lost the desire to continue living. Even so, the girl says he shouldn't feel that way, since he has the power to turn this war around. And if he really has even a little humanity inside him, he should use that strength to change the course of the battle. With that, inviting him to fight by her side around the world, she extends her hand and says, "There is still time." Sometime later, in the Kingdom of Clarity, the group of heroes is decorated by the king for their incredible feat of defeating the enemy leader. For that reason, the ruler declares the beginning of a 3-day celebration to commemorate the victory. Meanwhile, watching the capital from afar, the former captain rips off his own horn, presenting himself to the people after their act of bravery. The group of heroes parades through the crowd, and the leader says they wouldn't have won if not for the priestess, which makes Mirika jealous. Back to our protagonist. After removing anything that would imply he was a demon, the young man goes to the city's Adventurers Guild and asks to register at the counter. Out of patience, the attendant finds the form, and the boy fills it out without delay, receiving the identity card that classifies him as an F-rank adventurer. The clerk also tells the kid not to lose that thing, especially over the next 3 days, because the rest of the staff was released for the festival. Anyway, the man introduces himself as Clayman and wishes the rookie luck. Later at an inn, the boy throws a good amount of coins onto a table and, satisfied with the money he earned on his first day, believes he could live a stable life and confess to Cecilia again. Sometime later, upon entering the guild, he hears 2 adventurers talking about a boy who is rising in rank extremely fast. That very boy walks up to Clayman with 5 different missions and says he came to collect all the rewards, while the clerk wants to know why this kid always insists on being served by him. The boy explains that he got used to the clerk, and besides, he works fast. Putting that aside, the man asks who this boy really is, and he nervously replies that he's just an ordinary adventurer. Clayman doesn't believe someone who rose from rank F to D in just 1 week can be called ordinary. Still, since the boy hasn't done anything illegal, the attendant can't investigate him, so he drops the matter. At that moment, disguised so she won't be recognized, the priestess walks up to the counter and invites the boy to her house to talk. Obviously, the supposed demon isn't going to let that chance slip away, so shortly afterward they arrive at the mansion by carriage. One of the gate guards is eager for the beautiful woman to return, but when he sees a kid stepping out of her carriage, the big guy approaches him with hostility. The lady of the house appears to scold the guard, while another guard pulls him away before things get worse. Inside the mansion, the priestess apologizes since she should have found him earlier, but he doesn't regret the time spent as an adventurer because he was having a lot of fun. He's actually surprised she managed to find him, and she explains that the boy has become the city's main topic because he rose in rank in the blink of an eye. She wants him to leave the Adventurers Guild. She explains that even though the demon lord has been defeated, the human nations will soon restart their usual conflicts in search of supremacy. The signs are clear. For example, the hero has begun receiving several marriage proposals from other nations, and our protagonist understands why, as if the guy didn't already have a premium skin, now he's the most popular man in the world. However, the girl explains that those proposals are simply a way to gain more power and influence. Obviously, the boy will become an S-rank adventurer sooner or later, But the moment he reaches that rank, every eye will turn toward him, and if they find out he's a demon, they might try to use his power to conquer the world. For that reason, she wishes he wouldn't draw so much attention and that he would at least advance more slowly. She could simply hire him, but she doesn't have the budget to sustain an adventurer who earns that much. In return, she kneels and promises she would do anything if he accepts. Faced with that, acting like a complete idiot because he clearly has no idea how to deal with the girl he loves in that position, the boy makes it clear that he only has eyes for her. After laughing at the boy's reaction, the girl is pleased until her mother, Celia Akoran, walks in. The kid holds himself back so he doesn't embarrass himself in front of his future mother-in-law, while Celia explains that one of her maids will deal with the guard who disrespected him. The kid imagines that a big guy like that won't learn any lesson from a little maid, while the mother is actually discussing how many of the guard's bones should remain intact. After settling the matter, the lady reveals that her daughter has received many marriage proposals, including one from the hero. The kid goes crazy and swears he'll show everyone who the real monster is, but the girl tells him to cool it because she already turned down all offers. Seeing that this young man clearly likes her daughter, the mother proposes that he marry her. Extremely nervous, the boy looks at his beloved and explains that since he was already rejected once, what he wants now is to rise in life and confess to her again when he is stable because he wants to respect her feelings. Hearing that, the lady of the house says the boy passed the test and he is always welcome. After this conversation, the two meet in the garden to say their goodbyes and decide that from now on, they'll address each other by their first names, a big step in intimacy for the two of them. A little while later, we see our protagonist in the middle of one of his hero quests, and the situation is so insane that something which would normally take a full week to complete, he manages to resolve in just a single day. However, at the exact moment he prepares to head back home, he is suddenly attacked by 3 unknown assailants who launch a coordinated offensive. The young man tries to defend himself, but he soon realizes that those faces are extremely familiar to him. In fact, they are his former subordinates from back when he worked at the Demon Lord's castle, and, since he doesn't want to fight his old friends, he calls for a timeout and reveals his true identity. Everyone is overjoyed to see that the former captain is alive, but Duke also shows himself to be furious because the protagonist practically abandoned them when the hero group attacked. Because he wasn't there to take care of things as usual, the humans managed to reach the throne room and defeat the sovereign. It is almost as if the young man had let the heroes pass on purpose, and to top it all off, he now looks like a human for some bizarre reason. The youth asks everyone to calm down and guarantees he has an excellent motive for what he did, so the 3 wait to hear the explanation. But when he reveals that all of this happened because he has a crush on the priestess of the hero group, the demons simply cannot process the information. The protagonist makes it clear that he plans to live as a human from now on, warning them that they no longer need to see him as captain and are free to follow their own paths. However, they refuse to leave, as they prefer to stay close by, and besides that, they are dying of curiosity to meet the woman who stole the boss's heart. The lad explains that this is impossible, because if anyone saw them, it would cause widespread panic in the city. The subordinates argue that this isn't a problem, since they can hide their demonic characteristics the same way he did, and faced with such insistence, the young man eventually agrees, although he warns that blending in with humans won't be as easy as they imagine. Later that day, the former captain takes his subordinates to meet Cecilia after disguising them, but the process was much more brutal than expected, especially for Happiness, since the young man had to pluck her feathers one by one. Everyone sits down to have tea, and the priestess says it is a pleasure to meet them, commenting that, although she knows they are demons, they don't even seem to be. Duke explains that they all did their best to look human, and, in his case, being a Dullahan, the protagonist fused his head into the armor so it wouldn't go rolling around. The big guy seems to be getting along very well with the hostess, which leaves our protagonist a bit jealous, since the subordinate never talked that much with him. And now, in front of a cute girl, he won't stop chatting. The demon justifies that he didn't talk much before because he simply loathed the boss. The former captain had a reputation for being a complete shut-in at the castle, and even when his superior shouted for him to go out and kill some humans, the lad only threatened to give the master a beating until he gave up and left him in peace. Duke couldn't stand this behavior and, one day, invaded the youth's room to teach him a lesson, assuming an isolated loser would be an easy target, but he ended up getting the worst of it. After that, he became a loyal subordinate, and although he held a grudge over the beating for a while, he ended up accepting the young man's leadership. He believes the same happened with Happiness and Shake, but speaking of them, The warrior realizes he has no idea where the two have gone. It would be terrible if anyone besides Cecilia discovered the truth, so they enter the mansion to look for them, and end up finding the priestess's mother in the garden with Sheikh sleeping on her lap. The woman notices them approaching and asks if they know the boy, so they explain that the little one is a friend. The protagonist apologizes for any trouble he might have caused, but the mother says there is no need to apologize because she loves spending time with children. She found Sheikh running through the garden, and instead of worrying about insignificant details of how he got in there, decided to play tag with him until the little one got tired and fell asleep. Since Sheikh is safe, the lad asks if she saw a girl, and the woman confirms it, saying the headmaid took her inside a short while ago. Sensing the smell of trouble, everyone runs into the interior of the mansion, and they are surprised to see Happiness being trained in perfect maid etiquette. Sophia explains to the group that she was just finishing the training of the new employee, but Cecilia informs her that the young woman is not a maid, but rather a friend. The headmaid apologizes for the misunderstanding and says she can leave if she wants, but to everyone's surprise, Happiness decides she wants to stay, as she found the work of a maid much more fun than she imagined. With Sophia's approval, she officially becomes an employee of the house. At the end of the day, everyone prepares to leave and wishes good luck to the new maid. But before the protagonist can get away, Cecilia's mother pulls him aside. She mentions that her daughter hasn't been able to relax for weeks and plans to force her to take a day off, suggesting that if the lad wanted to ask her on a date, that would be the ideal moment. This is one of the best opportunities the youth has ever received, and he does not intend to waste it. On the appointed day, the priestess arrives in her carriage, and the young man is dazzled by how beautiful she looks. He promises to do everything in his power so that she enjoys the rest to the fullest, and the girl finds it funny that he takes this so seriously, but confesses to being anxious about the plans. While they walk, Cecilia notices that the local bakery has a new type of cake and suggests they stop there later, while the protagonist can hardly take his eyes off her because of how enchanting she seems. So far, everything is going very well, and the young lady seems to be truly enjoying herself. They pass by an accessory shop and are about to enter, but it happens that Yuga and Makana were also passing by there. As soon as he recognizes his friend, the hero calls her, completely ignoring our protagonist. He says it's a crazy coincidence that everyone took the day off on the same day and suggests they spend the rest of the time together. The priestess tries to refuse politely, explaining she was already with the lad, and upon hearing his name, Yuga feels like he has seen him somewhere before, but decides to leave that aside for now. The hero insists that everyone enter the shop together and barely gives time for objections. Makana is upset with the situation because the only day she convinced Yuga to go out with her was ruined. She notices that the protagonist was also on a date and wishes him good luck, thinking that if he wins over the priestess, the hero will have no choice but to focus on her. Inside, the lad reunites with Cecilia and offers a gift as a way of thanking her for all the help she has given him. Yuga sees the scene, and jealousy hits hard, causing him to shove himself between the two and say he wants to choose gifts for everyone, clearly trying to outperform the rival. The protagonist chooses a necklace he thinks will look great on the girl, while the hero just picks the most expensive pendant in the shop because he doesn't know what else to buy. While trying to make her use the accessory, he accidentally knocks off the young lady's disguise and, without the hat and glasses, everyone in the shop instantly recognizes the members of the hero group. They are surrounded by fans and chased down the street, which causes our protagonist to be separated from Cecilia. While trying to find her, he ends up bumping into Sir Raven, who is being cornered by a group of girls and looks very uncomfortable. The lad decides to help and distracts the crowd by pointing in Yuga's direction before pulling Raven into an alley. After losing the fans, the youth expected at least a thank you, but the warrior remains in silence. However, when he is leaving, Raven asks him to wait, and the protagonist immediately understands the reason for such silence. His voice sounds exactly like that of a teenage girl. The knight avoids speaking in public for fear that they will laugh at him, but the lad guarantees he won't mock him after all. Everyone has their insecurities. Raven feels relieved to find someone understanding, but soon the protagonist remembers he needs to look for Cecilia and runs off. The rest of the day passes without further problems, but the next morning, the youth discovers that the priestess has come down with a fever due to stress. She was already close to her limit, and having to deal with that crowd was the last straw, making the young man feel guilty. Cecilia's mother explains that he doesn't need to feel that way, as it is just a mild cold and her daughter isn't mad at him, but on the other hand, She is furious with Yuga and intends to have a serious conversation about boundaries with the hero. In fact, the hero tried to visit her as soon as he heard the news, but the maids kicked him out at the gate. The mother suggests it would be good for the girl to see a friend during recovery and asks the lad to go visit her. Sophia takes him to the room and announces he is there, which makes the priestess enter a panic and ask him to wait outside while she tidies things up. The head maid guarantees there is no reason for concern, because she already put away all of the mistress's toys, but hearing this out loud is even more embarrassing for the young woman. The lad enters and sits beside the bed, apologizing for what happened, but the girl says she doesn't blame him. However, she says that if he really feels guilty, he can compensate her by going out on another date as soon as she recovers. The protagonist is stunned because he just received a direct invitation and celebrates with such enthusiasm that he ends up shouting, which makes Sophia enter the room and kick him out politely so as not to worsen the patient's condition. On the way home, he notices Raven walking nervously toward the mansion and gets curious. The knight admits he is trying to build up courage to confess to the girl he likes, since she was the only one who didn't laugh at his voice. The lad encourages his friend, saying he is tall, handsome, and famous, and since the girl already accepted his voice, he has great chances of success. Raven realizes he is right and decides to go ahead with the confession, leaving the protagonist proud. However, it soon clicks that the knight is going exactly to Cecilia's house, which means the lad may have just created more competition for himself. Our protagonist tries to convince himself that Cecilia would never accept such a sudden confession from Raven, but the ghost of insecurity hits hard because, after all, they were in the hero's party together, and there is always that chance that romantic moments happen during their travels. He starts panicking again, but at that exact moment, he sees the red-haired swordsman walking back from the mansion completely shattered emotionally. The poor guy genuinely believed that the worst she could say was no, but he was dead wrong, and now he just wants to go home and rethink his life in the shower. Seeing his friend so dejected gets the former general curious, so he goes back to the house and asks Sophia if she knows what happened when the redhead came over to open his heart. The head maid tells him that the knight did indeed come there, but from what she saw, his goal was to talk to happiness. And this information hits our protagonist like a critical hit, because he had no idea that the guy's target was the demon maid. He decides to go talk to his subordinate, and when he finally finds her, he asks if she spoke to a red-haired guy a little while ago. The girl confirms the conversation, so the youth explains that the man is actually one of his friends, and she looks surprised by the revelation. The protagonist continues the interrogation by asking if it is true that the swordsman confessed his feelings and what she could have said to make him so upset. The young woman hesitates for a moment, but eventually reveals that when she was asked out, she immediately said that it was absolutely impossible. Being rejected like that would hurt anyone's feelings, so the former captain understands why the poor guy was in such deep depression. However, if the girl doesn't like him, there is nothing to be done. Yet she confesses that she actually does like him, but before the boss could ask what she meant by that, the little one runs off. Later that night, the young man calls a meeting with the rest of his subordinates to discuss what is going on with this complicated relationship. The other two have no idea who this suitor is supposed to be, so the leader clarifies that it is the swordsman from the hero's party, and as soon as he says this, Duke flares up in anger, demanding to know why the captain would set up a colleague with a human. The youth explains that he wasn't the one who introduced them and that he has no idea how they met in the first place, but that is not the point. He tells everyone about the confession, and the big guy assumes the girl must not have taken it well, since most humans she dealt with in the past were either trying to capture her for her feathers or were strange types with furry fetishes, which was terrible either way. That said, Shake doesn't believe the friend hates all humans. After all, she willingly chose to work as a maid because she liked the people in the mansion, so she must have been able to tell that the swordsman is a good guy. The next day, the protagonist heads into the guild as usual, but to his surprise, Clayman isn't here today. One of the other receptionists calls the young man over since she recognizes him as the guy who is always talking to the vice guild master. The lad has no idea what she's talking about at first, but she explains that despite how lazy Clayman seems, he really is the vice guild master here. This is a shocking revelation, but right now, the youth is more interested in finding out where he went. Since it is a secret, but our protagonist is friends with the missing man, the receptionist informs him that he was hospitalized after a fight with his wife. Later that day, the former general goes to the hospital to pay him a visit and is shocked by how badly he was hurt. When asking what happened, the injured man explains that yesterday was his wedding anniversary and he wanted to pick out a perfect gift, but he got so focused on it that the entire day went by while he stared at jewelry, and by the time he finally made it home, he had already missed dinner. The wife thought he had forgotten the date, and they got into an epic fight right after. The boy thinks the woman must be incredibly strong to leave him in that state, and the husband confirms this is expected since she is a former A-rank adventurer. The protagonist cannot believe his friend is married to someone of that level, but for the record, the lazy attendant is also a former elite adventurer. It is going to take a while for the wounds to heal naturally, so the young man offers to use healing magic to help, but the man shuts the idea down immediately, claiming that being injured is the perfect excuse to have his wife nurse him back to health with all her affection. Just then, the wife walks into the room and turns out to be none other than Sophia, which leaves our protagonist in total shock. He never could have imagined that she would get married to someone like that clerk, but they seem happy together, aside from the occasional violent misunderstanding. A little while later, the boy prepares to leave, and the head maid thanks him for keeping her husband company. He says there is no need to thank him because it is normal to visit an injured friend, but he takes the opportunity to ask if Cecilia is doing any better today. She tells him that the fever is gone and the girl already feels much better, but she is currently out running errands and cannot be seen for now. The youth asks for suggestions for a good gift to give her since he wants to do something nice, and the employee guarantees that as long as it comes from the heart, the mistress will be happy with anything. The protagonist thanks her for the advice and leaves the hospital. But as he is walking down the street, he starts fantasizing about what it would be like if he and the priestess got married. When he finally snaps back to reality, he realizes he is near the hero's lodging and decides to check on Raven. Upon opening the door, he finds the redhead lying in bed, just as depressed as on the day of the rejection, and he feels bad for the guy, wanting to help somehow. He asks the knight to explain how they first met, and the swordsman tells him it all started on an ordinary afternoon. He was busy with his daily patrol when he noticed a girl being harassed by a couple of drunk guys. The swordsman swiftly dealt with the first guy, and after the others realized who he was, they all ran away, giving the job as finished. Since the girl was safe now, he turned to walk away, but she grabbed his cape to thank him. The knight said it wasn't necessary since he was just doing his job, but then he realized he had revealed his voice to a stranger and started worrying she might make fun of him. However, on the contrary, Happiness told him he had a very nice voice. At first, he thought she was joking, but the girl was serious because she genuinely liked the sound of his voice. She thanked him again and ran off to finish her shopping, but she left a lasting impression on the warrior's heart. That is why he eventually worked up the courage to confess, but things didn't go as well as he thought. He thinks it was a mistake to confess so soon without knowing each other well, as it probably made her uncomfortable. However, the protagonist says he shouldn't give up so soon because he feels there is still a chance and suggests they both go out for a while to cheer up. The former general takes his friend to the jewelry store where he was with Cecilia last time, as he never got to buy that necklace for her. While they are there, the redhead spots a beautiful pendant that would look great on the little maid. He is unsure whether to buy it, fearing she might think it is weird to receive a gift from someone she barely knows, but the leader guarantees she will appreciate the intention and will certainly like the design because it suits her perfectly. The swordsman decides to buy the pendant, and since he doesn't want anyone to hear his voice, he communicates with the cashier using pen and paper. However, as they leave the store, they run into Manga, who is surprised to see them together in a jewelry store. She asks what they are doing there, and the protagonist promptly responds that they came to buy gifts for the women they love. The sorceress already knew about the boy's crush on Cecilia, so she isn't surprised, but she had no idea the redhead was also in love. She asks him to tell the details, but the knight refuses to say a word around her, and it is all her fault because she once mocked his voice, and ever since then he has been too shy to talk in front of her. The mage feels bad and has already apologized, but she knows that doesn't change what she did, so she doesn't want to force him. However, she still wants to know everything about this secret crush, and invites them both to lunch. When she thinks they will finally talk, the boys start stuffing food into their mouths, so they don't have to say anything. It was the perfect plan, but as soon as the sorceress mentions she could tell some stories about Cecilia if the protagonist talks to her, the young man gives up on the plan immediately. The girl asks how far he has gone with the priestess, and he says it is nothing special because they aren't dating yet, mentioning that she received tons of marriage offers, including one from the hero Yuga. Hearing this gets the sorceress a bit agitated because she doesn't understand why the hero doesn't pick up on her hints. He has always been a bit of an airhead, going as far as accidentally walking into the room while she and her friend were changing or taking a bath, besides being so popular that a crowd always formed wherever they went. It was never intentional on his part, but the carefree behavior really annoyed the priestess, who can be terrifying when she is angry. Manga then asks the redhead about his crush, but the protagonist cuts her off because he doesn't want her messing with his friend. The sorceress promises she isn't trying to mock him, she just has her own relationship problems she wanted to talk about. The truth is, she feels that Yuga hates her because of something she did. She tells the young man that, although the kingdom's reports say they had an absolute victory over the demon lord, they were actually defeated multiple times, and by a random demon general no less. Each time they lost, they ended up in a nearby village with all their wounds healed for some reason. But no matter how many times they went back, that demon kept defeating them in the most humiliating ways. Our protagonist starts to feel a little guilty since he prolonged their defeat a few times, just so he could spend more time looking at Cecilia. But in his defense, he wasn't trying to humiliate them. Anyway, after each defeat, the group was forced to lie to the people and hide the fact that they had lost to preserve faith in the hero's team. But supplies were running low, and if they didn't defeat that demon soon, people would lose all trust in them. That was when, on one attempt, the demon in question made an offer. He said he would allow them to go straight to the throne room unchallenged, but only if they were willing to leave Cecilia behind. And it was Manga who convinced everyone to abandon her friend so the leader wouldn't be seen as a failure. The priestess ended up surviving, but the sorceress doesn't believe the hero has forgiven her for making such a cruel choice. He still acts friendly and cheerful around her, but she notices his opinion has changed. Cecilia must also think differently of her after what happened, so things have been kind of awkward between them. The youth feels partly to blame for all this, as it was his actions that caused this rift in the group, but there is not much he can do to fix it. He asks if she at least tried talking to her friend about this, but how exactly is she supposed to do that? You can't just admit you were willing to sacrifice her because you cared more about protecting Yuga's honor as a hero. The protagonist knows it is a tough topic, but if nothing is done, they will continue being awkward with each other forever. So he tells her to think about it. The girl realizes the boy is right and decides to do her best to make amends. The redhead also decides to try talking to the boss's subordinate again, so he and the protagonist head back to the priestess's house. He eventually finds happiness and apologizes for confessing so suddenly last time. He hands her the pendant he bought and asks if they could start out as friends, and the little one seems to like that idea a lot. A few days go by and the protagonist is practically on the verge of death because he hasn't been able to see Cecilia in almost a week. After she recovered from her fever, the young lady became extremely busy visiting various villagers and healing the sick and injured in the region. The rest of the hero party is also in a huge rush since Raven is the knight captain, Manga is a royal magician, and Yuga has been splitting himself between extermination and diplomatic missions, while our former general, on the other hand, has been doing absolutely nothing. Just then, Happiness knocks on the young man's door and says she is there to deliver a message. Apparently, the priestess sent her to inform him that she will be returning home this afternoon, which means he will finally be able to see her again. The youth is absolutely radiant because he feels this is the perfect chance to deliver that necklace he bought since he missed his opportunity last time. However, while walking down the street, a random old lady at a fortune teller booth calls out to him and warns that he will have the worst luck imaginable today. This should be concerning, but the lad assumes it is just a scam and goes on with his day. After all, if he is on his way to meet his beloved, what could possibly go wrong? First, the protagonist goes to one of the local bakeries to buy a gift, but the lady who usually works there took the day off and asked her brother to fill in, and the guy is taking the job way too seriously. The situation gets quite awkward for our hero, so he just orders a few cupcakes and leaves quickly, but as he continues walking, he realizes that all the cakes were crushed by that guy's bulging muscles. The sweets are still tasty, but it is a lot of bad luck that it happened specifically to his batch. Other small bad things happen on the way to the mansion, like bumping into a giant man, nearly stepping on dog poop in the middle of the street, and a boy crashing into him, dropping the meat he was carrying on the ground. The lad could have ignored the child and kept walking, but he is too much of a nice guy for that, so he offers to buy new meat for the little one to stop crying, even though the accident was not his fault. So far, only minor inconveniences have occurred, but the former captain's luck keeps worsening because a moment later, he gets his wallet snatched by a pickpocket. Some people would give up right there, but the young man is not going to let his hard-earned money be wasted, so he uses a bit of his power to catch up to the thief and beats the living daylights out of him. The protagonist was completely justified, but unfortunately, Yuga happened to be nearby, and all the hero saw was the youth kicking a guy on the ground and taking a bag of money. The The young man tries to explain that it is all a misunderstanding, but the blonde does not buy the story and starts attacking him, trying to force his surrender. Our hero could definitely finish off the blonde if he wanted to, but that would destroy his cover as an ordinary human, so he decides to just run away. However, the plan does not work since his path is quickly blocked by a bunch of knights, and fighting his way out would only cause more problems in the future, so the youth ends up surrendering. He is thrown in jail for his supposed crime and begins to think the fortune teller might have been right about the bad luck. That said, it is not all bad since he still has friends looking out for him, and a little while later, Duke shows up for a visit. The big guy was recruited by the Royal Knights a few days ago and finds it hilarious that the boss got himself into this kind of trouble so soon. The lad argues that he did nothing wrong, but the subordinate already knows that and tells him not to worry. Raven heard about the case and is already investigating, so it is only a matter of time before the situation is resolved. Shortly after, another knight named Irene arrives and informs the protagonist that he has been cleared of all charges and is free to go. The youth is relieved, but she adds that Yugo wants to meet him to apologize, which is the last thing the lad expected to hear. Later, the two meet at a restaurant and the hero is sincerely sorry for all the trouble he caused, offering a feast as compensation. The young man is almost blinded by the purity emanating from the blonde, realizing he has no bad intentions, and decides to accept the offer. After the meal is consumed, the hero starts some small talk. First, he says he had no idea the youth was friends with Raven, and that although he did not recognize him at the time, he realized now that he is the same guy who was with Cecilia last time. Taking the opportunity, he asks what their relationship is, and the protagonist answers calmly that they are still just friends, which leaves the blonde visibly relieved. However, he then asks for advice on how to get along with the priestess, and that is the last subject our hero would want to discuss with him. The young man says he and the girl became friends recently, so if the hero wants advice, he should ask someone who has known her much longer, like Manga. However, the blonde claims he cannot ask her because the sorceress probably hates the priestess. The lad is shocked and questions if he heard the mage say this herself, but the hero explains he just knows she does not like her friend. He reveals that during the final battle, the sorceress convinced the team to abandon the priestess and that she would never do that if she did not hate her. The protagonist does not think it is fair for the hero to assume the girl's intentions without talking to her first. He argues that the mage was just as upset as everyone else about leaving her friend behind because she was crying the whole time, but the blonde asks how he could possibly know that if he wasn't even there. The lad still cannot reveal that he was the demon from back then, so he convinces the hero to drop the subject with a foolproof explanation, telling him to just trust his instinct. The blonde does not question further but refuses to accept that the fault was not the sorceress's, because if it wasn't hers, then it means the fault was his, and he could never forgive himself for abandoning his friend. The youth says he needs to stop pushing the blame onto his companions, because if he cannot accept responsibility for his own actions, then he does not deserve to be called a hero. The blonde suddenly starts crying, and the lad thinks he might have gone too far with the shouting, but it turns out the words really help the hero understand where he went wrong. Manga has been his childhood friend for ages and has always been by his side to support him since he became a hero, but he could not put faith in her and chose to believe she abandoned the priestess out of hatred. He doesn't know how to fix things between them, and the protagonist says he can just apologize, as the girl clearly still cares about him, and even if he gets scolded, she will definitely forgive him in the end. The hero is radiant and decides to apologize right now, but he is too nervous to go alone, so he begs the young man and Raven to accompany him. They all eventually arrive at the priestess's house, but the youth is a bit annoyed for being dragged on such a long detour when all he wanted was to visit his beloved. The hero says he just needs some moral support and that they can wait outside while he goes in to apologize. The blonde enters the mansion and runs to the sorceress's room, where he finds her in the middle of changing clothes. But while the girl immediately gets nervous, the boy remains serious and says he has something important to say. He confesses he realized he treated her unfairly all this time, thinking she abandoned her friend out of malice. He knows an apology is not enough to make up for what he did, but he hopes she can forgive him so they can go back to how they were before. The sorceress is truly relieved to know her friend does not hate her anymore, but then remembers she is still in her underwear, not knowing what is worse, the fact that he invaded the room, or the fact that he is completely indifferent to the scene. Anyway, she remains angry about the situation and takes her frustration out on the hero, while outside, Raven and the protagonist just watch what is happening without being able to do anything to help, leaving the blonde to his fate. Our protagonist is finally free to see Cecilia, and on the way, passes the fortune teller again, but still thinks it is a scam and does not stop to listen. The woman does not like being ignored for the second time today, but for some reason, it seems the lad's luck is changing for the better, indicating he must have done a good deed recently. A little further down the road, the youth meets the owner of the bakery, who just found out that most of the cupcakes he bought were crushed by her brother and wants to apologize for that. The lad says it is not a big deal, but she insists on fixing the mistake and offers a new bag of cupcakes. The youth continues his way, but is suddenly surrounded by 3 men in suits, and at first it seems he is in trouble. But it turns out these men are the personal assistants of the little boy from earlier and wanted to return the kindness by offering a bag of meat skewers. Sometime later, the former general finally arrives at Cecilia's house, but Happiness is a bit annoyed because he is very late. He goes inside to finally meet the priestess, who is very happy to see him after so much time. The lad delivers the gifts and the young woman is grateful, although she comments that she has never seen anyone combine cupcakes with meat skewers before. Putting that aside, she offers to prepare a pot of tea so they can share the snacks while they talk, and the youth is surprised to hear that since preparing tea is usually a maid's job. The girl proudly explains that Sophia taught her some household skills recently, so she now knows how to prepare tea properly and can cook without burning the food 70% of the time. After a few minutes of conversation, the priestess finds out that Happiness and Raven became friends, just as the youth met Mikana and Yuga. But speaking of those two, they suddenly hear the hero's voice calling for her. Moments later, the blonde invades his friend's room and says he has much to apologize for, but the sorceress hits him with a punch to get him out of the way, saying he is being too pushy. Cecilia has no idea what is going on, and the protagonist is equally surprised to see the others there suddenly, but everyone has something to confess. The mage goes first and asks forgiveness for abandoning her friend back then. The priestess guarantees that it does not bother her that much, because her life was not the only one at risk, and the others had to face the demon lord alone without a healer to support them. Besides, as soon as the villain was defeated, the sorceress was the first to run back to ensure her friend was all right, followed shortly by Yuga and Raven. The fact that they all ran back to help her, despite the exhaustion of battle, showed the girl that they still cared. Since there was no other choice at the time, the priestess could not blame them for the decision they made. All that matters now is that everyone came out alive, so there is no need for guilt. Later that same day, the couple goes out for a walk and the girl asks if the lad had anything to do with the sudden apologies. He admits he gave a little nudge in the right direction, since the whole mess was somewhat his fault at the beginning, and the young lady is grateful because her friends are finally united again. Feeling this is the perfect opportunity, the youth says he has a gift for her and takes out the necklace he bought. He asks if she is willing to accept it, and she happily replies that she will keep the gift forever, which is a huge relief for the former general, who did not know what he would do if he were rejected. A little while after the events we last saw, Cecilia asks our protagonist to join her on a mission because she received a desperate call for help from a remote village. The young man is more than happy to offer his assistance, but Seek is also present and he is not pleased about that at all. This was supposed to be the ex-general's golden chance to spend some quality alone time with his beloved, but the subordinate didn't want to be left out and found a way to insert himself into the trip, making it already too late to kick him out. The group eventually arrives at the village in question, and the priestess had heard that the place was attacked by bandits, but the situation is way worse than she imagined. The village chief soon comes out to greet her, and is delighted that such a famous figure decided to pay them a visit, though he has no idea who the two companions are. The girl informs him that they are her friends, and that both are skilled with healing magic, being there to help treat the injured, which makes the local leader quite happy. He leads them to the town hall where all the injured people are being kept, and the group gets to work immediately. They start healing the villagers one by one, and honestly, this much magic is practically nothing for the protagonist's immense power, but he notices that the girl is working herself to the bone. He admires how much she cares about helping those in need, but speaking of the injured, the young man is surprised that there were so many injuries yet not a single fatality among the residents. The chief explains that they got lucky because midway through the raid, the bandits were attacked and forced to retreat. It was a fortunate turn of events, but the ex-general thinks it is strange that someone showed up at exactly the right time to save everyone. At that moment, he looks at the priestess and realizes she is pushing herself way past her limit, so he walks over and asks her to take a break. However, the girl refuses to listen because she still wants to help the people, so the lad is forced to take matters into his own hands and casts a knockout spell on her. He is aware that a random guy knocking out a priestess might look bad, so he assures everyone that she is only asleep and that he just wanted to make her rest. A little while later, the young lady finally wakes up from her involuntary nap and is furious at the protagonist for casting a spell on her without any warning. The young man apologizes but argues that he had no choice because at the rate she was going, she would have passed out from mana exhaustion. The girl acknowledges that she might have been pushing too hard and understands the concern, but she still makes him promise never to use magic on her without permission again. The ex-captain promises and, to ease her heart about the villagers, tells her that he and Seek have already finished taking care of everyone. The priestess is really happy to hear that and thanks him sincerely, but soon the village chief comes in to check on things. He is glad to see the girl is feeling better and says he hates to ask for more, but there is a little girl who lives on the outskirts of town, and he was hoping the group could take a look at her. They ask if the child was also attacked by the bandits, but fortunately, that isn't the case. She is perfectly safe but has been weak and sickly ever since birth, so he was hoping the lone's magic could make her healthy. The blonde is willing to try and asks for directions to the house. Meeting Teal a few minutes later, the girl is surprised to see strangers walk into her house all of a sudden, but the priestess assures her there is nothing to worry about since the village chief sent them. It looks like the little one is about to ask a question, but suddenly she starts having a huge coughing fit, showing that the leader wasn't exaggerating about her health. Seek approaches to offer a special medicine he made himself, and, at first, the girl is skeptical about accepting a mystery juice from a stranger, but the protagonist guarantees that the subordinate knows what he is doing, and that the medicine is safe. She takes his word for it and downs the whole bottle, being surprised to find that her throat actually feels better. She is very thankful and is sure that the group's arrival must have been a blessing from the guardian deity, but the young man has no idea what that is. Teal explains that the guardian is the statue of a god on the outskirts of town, and tells them that on the day of the bandit attack, she was heading back to the village after leaving an offering at the statue when she felt really sleepy and passed out in the forest. That was why she managed to avoid being hurt by the criminals, and she is certain the deity protected her. The subordinate points out it could have been a complete coincidence, but the girl is absolutely certain of the divine protection because when she was 7 years old, she was surrounded by wolves one night and would have certainly died if the guardian hadn't rescued her with black lightning. Since then, she feels she has been protected. The little one doesn't see anything weird about it, but the sleep magic and black lightning sound an awful lot like something a demon would use, which makes the protagonist and the priestess suspicious. Teal swears her deity isn't suspicious at all, and even offers to lead them there just to prove it. However, when she shows them the place, it is clear that it's a demon statue. The girl gets upset and says she will not stand for anyone slandering her beloved guardian, but she can barely stand as it is. So the blonde apologizes for pushing her too far, and walks Teal back to her house. While the priestess is gone, the lad takes a closer look at the statue and realizes it looks very similar to one of those gargoyles they had back at the Demon Lord's castle. But as soon as he says this, the gargoyle comes to life and attacks him with black lightning. The protagonist dodges and Seek manages to subdue the creature, but they aren't sure what to do with it now. The subordinate suggests they should just kill it, but the ex-general stops him because he would rather try talking things out first before resorting to violence. After everyone has calmed down, the gargoyle sits and asks if they really don't intend to kill him. The young man reminds him that the creature attacked first, and the demon apologizes, explaining that hearing the protagonist identify him as a demon gargoyle made him realize he had been exposed and he panicked. He reveals that several years ago, he was originally created to guard a certain temple, but along the way, some bandits stole him. Those same criminals later went on to attack this village, so the gargoyle had had enough and struck them down with his lightning, an act that made the villagers start worshipping him as a guardian deity. Over time, they all slowly forgot about him, and the only one who still shows up is Teal, who has been coming to clean every day since she was saved as a kid. The protagonist asks if that means he has no intention of harming the villagers, and the monster responds that he has nothing to do with humans, he just lives there, and that's it. If that's the case, there's no reason to worry about it. So the young man apologizes for bothering him and turns to return to the village. But before that, he asks a little favor of his subordinate. The ex-general basically asks Seek to go back alone so he can spend the rest of this trip alone with Cecilia. But once he is finally alone with her, he realizes he doesn't actually have anything to talk about. As they are walking, the girl ends up tripping over a protruding root, and the young man jumps to catch her, causing the two of them to stare at each other for a few seconds before awkwardly turning away. A little while later, they finally return to the village and, as luck would have it, the bandits from earlier decided to attack again, confident that nothing will stop them this time. But suddenly the hero group appears to stop them. The criminals still believe those brats stand no chance against their sheer numbers, but then the protagonist gives Seek permission to fight with lethal intent, and the enemies start dropping like flies. The priestess is surprised by the subordinate's strength since she had never seen him fight before, but the ex-captain is much stronger, and when he joins the fight, he knocks out dozens of them at once. Even when one attempts a sneak attack against the blonde, the lad easily electrocutes the guy and takes him down, having total control over the situation. The battle is going very well, but suddenly the group notices smoke coming from the direction of the guardian deity's shrine, and that cannot be good. The youth asks Seek to go check it out while he finishes off the rest of the bandits. The remaining survivors group together in an attempt to swarm the couple, but the protagonist bluntly tells them that no matter how many of them there may be, they will never be a match for him. He then proceeds to blow them all away with a windstorm spell, and the bandit situation is officially taken care of, but the lad is a bit concerned by the fact that the subordinate hasn't returned yet. Something might have happened, so he and the girl go to check it out, and to their shock, they find the gargoyle severely injured and Seek being held up by his throat. The protagonist angrily glares at the man and demands to know who he is, so the priestess explains that this is Miller, the hero of the neighboring Gallus Empire. The young man is surprised to learn there is more than one hero in the world, but his friend's safety is what's important right now. Once Seek regains consciousness, he explains that he arrived and found Miller attacking the gargoyle from behind while it was trying to protect Teal, so he tried to stop him but ended up losing the fight. Miller says there is nothing wrong with trying to kill a gargoyle, and that it's the subordinate's fault for being dumb enough to get in his way. He then starts walking back over to finish the job, but the protagonist tells him to stop and tries to talk him out of it by explaining that the creature isn't causing any harm. However, the invader doesn't care whether the monster is harmless or not, and warns that if the young man tries to stop him, he's going to be cut down as well. The youth responds by firing off a lightning bolt, but to his surprise, the electricity completely dissipates the second it comes in contact with the opponent's sword. The blonde yells for her partner to fall back, because that weapon is a man-made magic sword that absorbs all magic it touches, so the protagonist would be no match. The priestess begs the psychopath to stop, because if innocent people die at his hand, it could start a war. But he actually likes the sound of that. One of his favorite hobbies is killing people, so if a war were to start, he would be allowed to kill as many as he wants. It's clear that this dude is a total maniac, so there's no way the ex-general can let him walk free after this. Miller laughs at the fact that the lad thinks he can win, even though he already knows his magic is completely ineffective against that sword. However, the protagonist isn't fazed and begins firing off several blasts of magic one after the other. The sword may absorb magic, but since it was man-made, there must be a limit to how much it can hold. After unleashing a bunch of his most powerful spells, the young man eventually hits that limit, and the sword shatters altogether. The lad then uses a wind spell to punch the enemy into a tree, and it looks like he has been defeated, but Miller still had one last trick up his sleeve and threw a magic spear at the hero. A trick like that would never work on the protagonist, who easily dodges it, but the gargoyle was right behind him. The spear was headed right for the creature, but at the last second, Teal suddenly jumped in front and took the spear to the chest. That wasn't what the killer was expecting, but he still finds it really amusing that the girl would sacrifice herself to save a demon. The protagonist turns back to Miller and tells him he won't get away with this, but the coward already has an escape plan ready and fires a bunch of arrows at the lad's friends, forcing him to create a shield to protect them. During this time, the culprit manages to sneak into the forest. The ex-general blames himself for letting the enemy escape by relying too much on his magic, and all that anger building up inside him causes his true demon form to come out. This is a form that Cecilia has never seen before, so she is worried that he might have lost control. But right now, there is only one thing on the young man's mind, and that's to beat the living daylights out of Miller. He flies into the air to start tracking him, and the second he locates him, pins his head to the ground and proceeds to kick him through a couple hundred trees. The maniac cannot believe that a demon this strong still exists, even though the demon lord has already been defeated. But a second later, the protagonist appears behind him to continue the beatdown. Miller tries to fight back, but the youth easily disarms him and knocks him to his knees before dragging him into the air by his neck. He could kill him right then and there, but he knows that's not something the priestess would want him to do, so instead, he just drops the body and lets him take his chances with the water. The ex-captain eventually returns to Teal's house, where he finds the blonde waiting for him. He asks how the others are doing, so she tells him she was able to heal the girl and the subordinate, so they both survived, and confesses she is really glad he came back in one piece. Cecilia invited little Teal to work as a maid in her home, ensuring the girl has a safe place to stay. But in the midst of that, our priestess and the protagonist were summoned to the castle for a matter of extreme urgency. As he kneels before the king, the lad confesses to being a bit nervous, fearing the monarch might be an insufferably arrogant jerk like the Demon King. But to his surprise, the sovereign is actually a very chill guy. He is not one for formalities, so he cuts to the chase and explains that he heard how the two chased off the hero Miller and the bandits attacking the village of Dagaz, and thus wants to grant them a reward for their efforts. The blonde tells the king she wants nothing, which is exactly what you expect from a saint, so the sovereign looks at the young man and asks if there is anything he desires. Our hero informs him that he has a great desire, but says it is something even a king could not grant. This makes the monarch curious, since few things are beyond his reach, and when questioned, the lad blurts out that he wants to win the priestess's love. He did not think much before saying that out loud, and now the girl is dying of embarrassment. A little while later, they return home, and she starts yelling at the young man for causing such a scene in front of the king. The boy apologizes for the mistake, but the girl's mother finds the whole situation hilarious and decides to use the moment to tease the lovebirds. Aqua tells the protagonist that he needs to reflect on what he has done, so for the next month, he is prohibited from seeing the blonde. This is worse than a prison sentence for the former general, but he is not the only one panicking. Even though she is embarrassed, the saint cannot imagine going a whole month without talking to him and tries to convince her mother to change her mind. The mother-in-law relents a bit and cuts the time down to 2 weeks, but still insists on the separation and orders Happiness to take the young man away. The subordinate complies and starts dragging her boss out, but as they pass through the halls, they spot Seek sitting in the garden alone, with an expression of deep sadness. The protagonist assumes this has to do with what happened with Miller and the fact that the subordinate was not able to protect anyone, but since he does not know how to cheer him up, he just goes home for now. There, he finds Teal taking care of the gargoyle, who is living at his place because the priestess's mother did not allow the girl to bring him into the mansion. Happiness warns that the little one needs to get back to work, and they prepare to leave, though Gar is a bit worried that the girl is pushing herself too hard considering her condition. Alone, the hero lies on his bed and thinks about what to do now that he cannot talk to his beloved. Since he spent most of his days at her house, he decides to go to the guild the next morning and ask for as much work as possible so he does not die of boredom. About half a month passes, and the lack of the young man is hitting the blonde hard as she finds herself subconsciously making cups of tea for him even though he is not there. Her mother is enjoying every second of watching her daughter's longing and starts teasing her, asking who the second cup of tea is for. The saint turns completely red and lies that she was waiting for her mother, but everyone knows that is not true. Aqua mentions that the deadline is almost up and confesses she is curious about what the young man has been doing to pass the time. Meanwhile, the protagonist has just returned home after pulling an all-nighter to finish all his missions. He is excited because he will finally be able to see his beloved soon, but the gargoyle interrupts him for a serious talk. The monster returns to his original form, and the lad notices that the creature's body is falling apart. The wounds caused by Miller were much more serious than they seemed, and he estimates he has only a few days to live. The Guardian's only wish is for the young man to look after little Teal when he is gone. The protagonist does not understand what he is talking about, since the girl seemed stable. But the monster, who has watched over her since childhood, feels that something is not right with her. The lad promises he will look after the little one, but interrupts the death drama by saying he intends to save his friend's life no matter the cost. The creature thanks him for the sentiment but warns that there is no more time, which does not stop our hero from trying. He immediately runs to talk to Duke about remedies, and the knight explains that gargoyle disintegration is an easy thing to solve, as you just need to feed the monster some magicite. The lad is shocked that he did not realize the solution was that simple, and runs off to find the mineral without hearing the rest of the subordinate's explanation, which will certainly bring problems in the future. Upon leaving the knight's hall, he realizes he does not even know where to find this item, but before he can investigate, he hears the blonde screaming his name with a desperate voice. She explains that Teal is in a very bad state and needs urgent help. The young man rushes to the mansion and finds the girl in bed with a high fever while Seek tries to prepare a medicine. Her condition worsened quickly due to overwork, and the available medicine only serves to alleviate the symptoms. They need twilight grass to cure her, something that only grows in regions rich in mana. The protagonist offers to find the herb, and the saint goes with him, which he appreciates greatly, especially since he still needs to find the mineral for the gargoyle. At the merchant guild, they discover that everything is out of stock, which is the worst possible news. However, while they are trying to think of what to do, Clayman appears to pick up a request form and overhears the conversation. He tries to convince the lad to accept a mission involving a monster in a magicite mine, where the grass happens to grow as well. The boy and the blonde accept the mission, and Sophia decides to go along, both to support her husband and to ensure little Teal recovers. It takes 2 days to reach the mining town, and the maid orders everyone to rest as the monsters are active at night, and the target is an extremely dangerous mutant rock eater. The creature is resistant to magic attacks, and the request requires bringing back the entire hide, so the best option is to immobilize it. The next morning, everyone is ready, and the protagonist is surprised that Sophia intends to fight in her maid uniform. She says she feels fine that way, but the real reason is that she loves the fact that Clayman thinks she looks cute in that outfit. As they enter the mine, they spot the monster devouring minerals, and the lad tries a lightning spell, but the beast ignores the damage. Clayman explains they must attack from the inside, so he will use his shikigami to protect his wife as she jumps into the beast's mouth. The couple fully trusts each other, and the protagonist and the saint put all their effort into trapping the rock eater with ice and magic chains. With the monster immobilized, Sophia jumps inside to destroy its guts. Unfortunately, the creature creates several smaller eaters that are also immune to magic, forcing the lad to fight with his fists to keep them away. Without the protagonist maintaining the ice spell, the larger monster breaks the chains and knocks the priestess down. The youth runs to her side to protect her, but the beast freezes in place because the maid has started hacking it apart from the inside. The monster dies, and the Vice Guild master is relieved to see his wife emerge unharmed. They collect the mineral and the grass, and the lad decides to fly back at night to deliver the medicine as soon as possible. He cannot let the others find out he is a demon, but the blonde already predicted he would try to slip away and is waiting for him outside with everything prepared to help him. The lad thanks her for the support and takes off into the night sky, reaching the city hours later. He finds the gargoyle on the table and starts shaking him violently, asking if he really wants to leave Teal alone in the world. The girl's name makes the monster wake up, and the youth warns that she will be fine, as he has already delivered the grass to seek. While stuffing the gargoyle's mouth with magicite, the young man notices a claw mixed in with the stones. But before he can identify it, his friend starts to glow and is completely healed. The monster runs to the girl's side to ensure she is okay, and the protagonist is moved by the reunion, but he still has a long night of flying ahead to get back to the mining village before the others get suspicious. After staying awake all night, the former general ends up passing out from exhaustion on the priestess's thighs during the carriage ride home, and she does not seem to mind one bit. A few days after returning to town, our protagonist happens to run into Clayman while he is out shopping. Apparently, the Vice Guild master is looking for an anniversary gift for Sophia, and since the former general has nothing better to do, he offers to help. He finds a pair of cat ears and suggests that the man could give these to his wife. But the clerk says that is a terrible idea and already knows what he wants to get her anyway, turning down the help. The young man apologizes, but as he puts the cat ears back, he notices a black suit with a matching helmet nearby. His edgelord instincts immediately take over, and he decides to try it on. Clayman thinks the outfit looks incredibly cringy, but the youth absolutely loves the look and feels no shame whatsoever. He really wants to test out some cool moves in this gear, so he asks his friend to give him as many quests as possible. The Vice Guild master, getting annoyed by the hero's acting, decides to just play along. He takes the young man back to the guild and tells the receptionist that he wants to sign up for any available quests. The girl does not recognize the lad because of the costume, but since the superior is vouching for him, she looks through the stack and informs him that there are 4 A-rank quests available. The protagonist declares he will handle all of them, which shocks the receptionist since she has never heard of anyone strong enough to handle 4 A-rank tasks at once. She asks for his name, but in true edgelord fashion, he gives a fake one. And Clayman is so exhausted that he doesn't even bother correcting him. Later that day, the youth takes down a dragon in the forest to complete one of his missions, and when he returns to the guild with the dragon heart, everyone begins to respect him as a powerful warrior, even though his identity remains a mystery. By the end of the day, the hero has finished most of his tasks, but one remains: capturing a specific criminal. That night, A bandit named Envy sneaks up on 2 guards and uses sleep magic to knock them out before entering a storage room with his 2 sidekicks, Jealousy and Heartburn. Honestly, who comes up with these names? They corner the owner while he is busy with inventory and tell him they are going to steal everything. But before they can take a single item, our hero emerges from the shadows. He tells them to surrender before they get hurt, but the 3 are unwilling to give up, so Heartburn and Jealousy attack with full force. The young man goes back and forth with them for a bit just to keep things interesting, but he eventually decides to get serious and activates the lightning magic in his sword. With a single surge, he electrocutes both of them, leaving Envy as the last one standing. The thief tries to knock the protagonist out with magic, but the youth counters the spell and charges forward, slashing him with the blunt end of his blade. He wouldn't want to actually kill someone who looks like a child, but it still definitely hurt. The owner of the warehouse is very grateful because he doesn't know what he would have done if his stock of Valentine's chocolates had been destroyed. Now he can make his deliveries to the townspeople without issue, and it is all thanks to our main man. The youth is surprised to learn that this world celebrates Valentine's as well, but just then, a group of knights shows up to check on the commotion. Duke and Raven immediately recognize the boss the second they see him, but the other knight with them has no idea who he is and asks for his identification. The protagonist still wants to stay in character, so he gives her his fake name and tells her that the kids lying unconscious on the ground are all thieves. Before she can question him further, he disappears in a puff of smoke. Normally the knights would go looking for him, but since Raven knows the truth, he tells everyone there is no need to chase the guy. While the knights arrest the gang, Duke walks to the back of the warehouse because he knows the boss must still be around. He finds the youth hiding behind a bunch of boxes and isn't surprised by the act, as this isn't the first time it has happened. The young man usually gets hooked on a costume he thinks is cool and spends way too much time role-playing, only to realize later how cringy he was being. The subordinate tells him to take a good look in the mirror, and after the protagonist observes himself, he realizes he has been acting like a dark teenager the whole time. After cringing for 10 solid minutes, he takes off the outfit and heads to the guild to collect his reward. While there, he asks the vice guildmaster what the thieves' goal was. From what the man heard, those guys used to be B-rank adventurers until they found a weird book in a dungeon and started talking about destroying Valentine's Day. The hero doesn't quite get it, but he understands the feeling of hating the holiday since he never receives anything. Meanwhile, at the mansion, several girls are busy making chocolates for their loved ones with Sophia's help. Manga finishes her batch and notices that the priestess is making a massive amount, so the blonde explains that she plans to hand them out to children at the orphanage. It is a sweet gesture, but the mage thinks it defeats the purpose of the day since you are supposed to give them to someone special. The next morning, Gar informs the protagonist that it is officially Valentine's Day. The young man looks in the mirror and waits patiently, hoping his beloved will show up any minute, and the doorbell eventually rings. To his disappointment, it is only Teal, and she isn't even there for him. She brought special magicite chocolates for the gargoyle. The hero decides to give them some privacy and heads to the guild, but moments later, Clayman walks in carrying a box of chocolates from Sophia. When he opens them, everyone is blinded by the sheer amount of love and care put into the gift. The husband is over the moon with joy, and the protagonist gets so jealous that he runs into the city to avoid being reminded of his loneliness. Unfortunately, he sees nothing but couples everywhere. He tries to talk to Duke, but he sees his subordinate receiving chocolates from a female knight, which makes him feel even more isolated. He even spots Raven receiving sweets from Happiness, which makes him even more upset. Later, the young man sees a huge line of women near a cart and learns they are all waiting to give chocolates to the hero Yuga, which is the final nail in the coffin for his pride. Manga happens to pass by, and the protagonist asks if she is there to drop off sweets for the blonde. That was her original plan, but she is having second thoughts because she thinks her cooking isn't good enough. The youth tries to cheer her up, but Yuga himself shows up and surprises the mage. The blonde hero says he just wanted to make sure her chocolate was the first one he received. The girl is happy to hear he values her gift most of all, but she is still worried because the result looks a bit messed up. The lad says it doesn't matter and accepts the gift anyway. When she pulls out the chocolate, it looks like it has been sunbathing since the dawn of the universe. Our hero doesn't know what to say because that thing is clearly a biohazard, but Yuga doesn't care and eats it all in one bite, claiming he really enjoyed the flavor. Since he is a terrible liar, he must be telling the truth. A little while later, the protagonist goes to the mansion to see why he hasn't received anything, but he only finds Aqua and Seek. The mother tells him he is out of luck because her daughter is in town giving chocolates to orphans. The youth falls to his knees in despair, and the woman feels bad for him, so she offers him some of her own chocolates. At first, the lad tries to refuse since he only wants them from the priestess, but he is desperate enough to take what he can get. Moments later, Duke runs over to warn that Envy just broke out of jail and is going on a rampage. The thieves are riding a giant monster that sucks up all the chocolate in the city to ruin the day for everyone. Yuga tries to talk them out of it, but Envy refuses to listen to a handsome guy who gets tons of candy all the time. The monster tries to squish the hero, but he moves out of the way just in time. Soon, our protagonist arrives and realizes the situation is serious. He climbs onto a roof and tries to convince the villain to stop, saying he understands the pain of not receiving chocolates. Well, technically he got some from a friend's mom, but that's embarrassing to say. The bandit tries to squish the hero, but the youth jumps onto the monster's arm and knocks out the sidekicks. The leader moves the arm to throw him off balance and fires a fireball, but the young man counters with his own magic, and the two get locked in a duel. The villain asks why the protagonist doesn't hate the day as much as he does, and the hero responds that he still has hope that the girl he likes will give him chocolate. This makes the thief burn with rage, and he blasts the protagonist away before sucking up all the chocolates in the area, including a box the priestess was holding. Seeing this, the young man realizes that box was likely meant for him, and losing it makes him so mad that he stops holding back and fires a bolt of lightning straight at the enemy. The surge incinerates the magic book, causing the monster to crash. Yuga catches the villain just in time, but discovers that Envy is actually a girl. She caused the destruction because the boys she liked refused her gifts, and she felt her love was worthless. The blonde hero tells her that isn't true, and that he is happy to receive chocolates from anyone who puts their heart into it. This melts the girl's heart, but the protagonist is once again sidelined despite doing the hard work. He falls to the ground in defeat since no one is paying attention to him, but his beloved could never forget him. She approaches and hands him a Valentine's bag she prepared. The youth is thrilled, though a bit disappointed to see she gave bags to many people, including Seek and Happiness. However, when he looks inside, he realizes she gave him a cake in addition to the cookies, and since no one else got a cake, it must mean she considers him someone special. A few days go by and our protagonist receives a new mission from Clayman, being informed that the Merchants Guild would like to hire him to protect some important cargo. Lately, they have been targeted by thieves, and many of their goods have been stolen. So they want the young man to prevent future crimes and, if possible, recover what was taken. The former general isn't at all interested in the task initially, since it would require a trip to the port city, but then he realizes that port cities have beaches, and beaches mean he could have some fun with Cecilia. He gets excited instantly and accepts the job without hesitation. However, when he goes to invite his beloved, he suffers a major disappointment because she informs him that she cannot go due to being completely swamped with work. Instead, the priestess asks Happiness to accompany the lad. The young man is very discouraged, but he understands that it is all his fault for not checking the blonde's schedule before accepting the contract, so he decides to just suck it up and finish the service as quickly as possible. At that moment, he notices that his subordinate is carrying something new on her back, and upon questioning her, the girl explains that it is a weapon made from the feathers she plucked from her own body. The youth gets the point, but he begs the maid to stop striking strange poses in public because people might start looking at them in a bizarre way if she keeps that up. The protagonist notices that the girl has been very cooperative about accompanying him, which is a bit out of character for her since she usually avoids this kind of effort. But he soon remembers that he also invited Raven, so she probably only accepted to spend time with the knight. As soon as the redhead arrives, the harpy greets him and he becomes extremely awkward, especially upon noticing that she is wearing the gift he gave her. Shortly after, the departure of the carriage is announced, so the subordinate goes to secure a seat for everyone, and while she is away, the knight asks his friend what is going on because he had no idea the girl would be there. The young man explains that he brought her because she is skilled with magic and very useful in battle. This makes sense to the redhead, but he feels a bit disappointed in himself for not knowing such a fundamental detail about her. The former general tells him not to blame himself because they haven't known each other for that long, and there will still be many chances to get to know her properly. A few minutes later, everyone gets on the carriage, and the redhead ends up missing the perfect opportunity to sit next to his beloved, showing that the trip did not start well for him at all. As soon as they arrive in the port city, the protagonist warns that he is going to visit the client to start the mission, so he wants the other two to circulate through the area to gather as much information as possible about the robberies. This was a plan the young man cooked up specifically to give the couple some alone time, but as soon as he leaves, the girl wanders off and ends up finding a crew member of a ship. The knight follows her and explains to the sailor that they are adventurers hired to investigate the thefts at the port and would like to know if he has any clues. The sailor says he has no idea and that this whole situation has been making his job a living hell because the higher-ups are convinced that he and the other sailors are the culprits. The young woman asks if that means all the sailors are innocent, and the man, named Masa, confirms this and swears that men of the sea never steal. The redhead understands the situation and guarantees Masa that they will investigate the case to find the real perpetrators, which leaves the sailor shocked because he expected to be accused like everyone else. He is very grateful that they believe in his crew's innocence, so he calls all his companions and asks them to tell the two everything they can remember about the incidents. A little later, the protagonist returns and asks his friend if he discovered anything, but the knight says he has nothing concrete. The sailors apparently performed patrols every night, but at a certain point they started hearing a beautiful voice singing, and after that, the next thing they remembered was all the cargo having been stolen. None of them remember how the theft happened, and a story like that would naturally make anyone suspect the crew, but if they were behind it, they probably would have invented a better excuse to hide the truth. For this reason, the redhead believes something is wrong and that it is likely the work of a demon. The former general assumes his friend is talking about a mermaid, and since he has never personally met one, he thinks it would be very cool to meet another demon, so he excitedly calls his subordinate to tell her there might be a mermaid in town. As soon as he says this, the sailors hear it and are immediately terrified at the mention of the creature. The youth asks if it is really that big of a deal since he doesn't think mermaids are that dangerous, but there is nothing more terrifying to a man of the sea than one of them. According to them, countless ships have been sunk after encountering these creatures, and many sailors met horrible ends. Everyone begins to beg the duo to take care of the mermaid because they are too afraid to go back to the ship. The sailors are on the verge of a full-blown panic attack, so to calm them down, the redhead reveals that he is the captain of the Order of Knights and a member of the hero's party, promising that no matter what happens, he will protect them, which leaves everyone relieved. A little later, the protagonist and the subordinate are sitting on a bench while the knight makes some supply purchases, and the young man remains pensive for a while because he realized that demons are still seen as monsters to be feared by most humans. The girl says he shouldn't be surprised since their objective was to destroy humanity, so it is natural for people to be afraid. Soon after, the redhead returns with an important lead, saying that while he was shopping, a man approached him with information. According to the report, the individual saw the cargo being transported to a cave near the port and also remembers seeing a mermaid in the same place. It seems something very suspicious is happening, so the knight thinks they should check it out, but he asks the girl to wait there because fighting a demon is dangerous and he doesn't want her to get hurt. The maid asks why he is so motivated to defeat this demon, and he tells the story of a day when a village was attacked by a rampaging creature. He and the rest of the hero's party arrived too late to save the place, and he failed to protect many lives, which is why he refuses to let anyone he cares about run into danger. The young woman understands the point of view, but deep down she doesn't care about the warning, so she gets up and tells him to hurry because she is going along whether he likes it or not. The redhead tries to stop her, but the protagonist says to let it go because she won't change her mind, and besides, she is strong enough to take care of herself against any demon. They eventually arrive at the cave and, exactly as the man said, the stolen goods were taken there. The place also has a docking space for 2 small boats, but when the group goes to check, they realize someone else is there, and, a moment later, the mermaid emerges from the water. The creature immediately begins to sing in an attempt to hypnotize the group, but everyone manages to cover their ears in time, and the harpy uses her magic to cancel out the rival's song, allowing the knight to close the distance to finish the job. However, as soon as the redhead puts his sword to the mermaid's throat, she begins to cry and says he can kill her if he wants, but she needs help to rescue her friend from the humans who kidnapped her. The knight dismisses this immediately as a shameless attempt to deceive him, deciding to kill her anyway, but the subordinate does not feel comfortable with the direction of things and runs in front of the mermaid to stop him. The redhead keeps his sword raised and orders her to move away because he is not going to spare the demon, but the girl refuses to get out of the way. The protagonist sees the tension increasing, so he runs over and asks his friend to lower the weapon. The knight demands to know why the youth is also on the demon side, but the lad says he is not choosing sides. He explains that he is not asking to spare her out of pity, because he knows that if a demon hurt the people he loves, he would not hesitate to kill it either. However, it seems the mermaid has a reason for what she did, so it doesn't cost anything to listen to her before the execution. The redhead decides to listen to his friend and agrees to lower the sword, at which point the maid's legs give way because she was absolutely terrified the whole time, especially because having a sword pointed at her brought back old traumas from when humans tried to sell her for profit. After the girl calms down, the protagonist introduces everyone to the mermaid, but the knight is still so irritated that he refuses to look at her. The creature's name is Shike, and, when questioned about the reason for the attack, she explains that she was ordered to do that by a human. Mermaids like her usually keep their distance from people, but one day she and her friend ended up caught in a storm and ended up being captured. The leader of the criminals took her friend Misaki as a hostage and threatened Shiki to follow his orders if she ever wanted to see her again. So since then, she has been putting people to sleep whenever they commanded. The youth doesn't think she is lying, but the redhead refuses to believe a single word that comes out of a demon's mouth. The maid understands the distrust and doesn't expect him to forget the pain that demons caused, but she asks him to trust her just this once. The knight finally yields and agrees to start a new investigation based on the premise that the mermaid is telling the truth. Everyone starts searching the cave, and it soon becomes clear that it was a trap from the start. Most of the boxes are empty, and the jewels present are all fakes placed there as a distraction. The plan was likely to lure them into the cave, and while they were distracted with the fake treasure, Sheik was supposed to put them to sleep so the thieves could come in and finish them off. If that's the case, the bandits must be on their way right now. A few moments later, a group of men walks toward the cave, led by the same guy who gave the tip to the knight, and they are all joking about how easily the captain fell for the trap, but then they see the official himself walking toward them and fall into absolute silence. They try to act naturally and pretend they did nothing, but the redhead already knows they are the ones to blame for the thefts and the mermaid's kidnapping, and although he doesn't intend to kill them, he is going to make the arrest as painful as possible. The thieves try to overpower the knight, but his swordsmanship is far superior, and in seconds he knocks out half the group. The other half tries to flee, but the protagonist and the subordinate had already blocked the escape route, and the girl uses her fans to knock everyone down with a huge gust of wind. After everyone is tied up, they try to lie, saying the mermaid forced them, but the knight points his sword at the leader and forces him to reveal the location of the real hideout before he loses an eye. At the hideout, the group finds a suspicious box moving, and it is clear that Misaki is trapped there, so the redhead opens the box and frees the mermaid, reuniting her with Shike. Both are radiant with the reunion. They prepare to return home, but before that, the knight apologizes to Shike for almost killing her earlier, even though she wasn't the culprit. The mermaid understands his skepticism and can't stay mad, since he saved her friend after all. As a token of gratitude, before leaving, she gives the redhead a kiss on the cheek, leaving him completely stunned and the subordinate burning with jealousy. She refuses to be outperformed by a mermaid they just met, so she apologizes quickly to her boss for what she is about to do and knocks him to the ground to gain enough time to kiss the knight on the lips without the protagonist seeing. However, even if the young man didn't see the act, just by looking at the expression on his friend's face, anyone could figure out what she just did. A few days after those intense events we saw previously, our protagonist, Yoki, is just chilling at home when he receives a formal letter from Cecilia. Now you know our boy, his heart probably skipped a beat just seeing her neat handwriting on the envelope. She was inviting him over for some tea, which is basically their thing now. He thanks little Teal for taking the time to deliver the message, but honestly, Teal was barely listening. She admits she was heading there anyway because any excuse to spend time with Gar is a good excuse for her. I actually found it hilarious how Yoki was surprised by how calm she seemed at first. Usually she's like a guided missile targeting that gargoyle, but she was playing it cool for about 5 seconds. The moment Yoki stepped out the door, the act was over. She pounced on Gar, hugging him with everything she had and shouting about how much she missed him. It's wild to see a human girl so obsessed with a stone demon, right? She even brought him a massive bag of magicite she gathered with her own 2 hands, telling him to eat up like he's at an all-you-can-eat buffet. Gar, being the stoic protector he is, thanked her, but had to remind her not to break her back doing all that heavy lifting for him. Our former general overheard the whole thing and, let's be real, he couldn't wait to gossip about it. When he got to Cecilia's mansion, he shared the whole scene with her, and they both had a good laugh over tea. Cecilia mentioned that it just goes to show how pure Teal's love is, but that comment actually triggered a mini existential crisis for Yoki. He started thinking, wait, we've been hanging out as just friends for a while now. Am I really okay with being stuck in the friend zone for the rest of eternity? The next day, Yoki decided he needed professional help, so he called Duke to a cafe. Duke, seeing the serious look on his boss's face, immediately thought Yoki had committed some sort of international crime or accidentally blew up a building. But no, Yoki confesses it's about Cecilia. He tells Duke that after leaving her place the day before, he got a bit too curious about what she does when he's not around. So, what does a powerful demon do? He uses an invisibility spell and sneaks back like a complete ninja. He saw her training like a beast in the backyard with Seek, and it hit him that there are entire layers to Cecilia's life that he knows absolutely nothing about. He wants to know the real her, but Duke, being the voice of reason, didn't hold back. He told Yoki that despite all his big talk about love, he's a total coward when it comes to actually making a move. At this rate, he's going to be the tea time buddy forever. Plus, Duke gave him a stern warning to stop using high-level demon magic for stalking, which, honestly, is fair play. Right as they were talking, Makana happened to stroll by and overheard the word stalking. Yoki tried to play it off as a massive misunderstanding, but Duke saw an opportunity. He basically drafted Makana to help Yoki, since she's been Cecilia's best friend since forever. Raven ended up joining the table too, and Yoki, desperate for intel, begged them to spill all the tea on Cecilia's past. Makana started dropping some truth bombs. She claimed the hero's party would have collapsed in a week if Cecilia hadn't been there. And get this, it wasn't just about her healing spells. The real problem was Yuga, the official hero. Apparently, whenever they entered a town, Yuga would be swarmed by a literal sea of fangirls. The guy was too nice to tell them to leave, Raven was too shy to speak a word in public, and Makana's attempts to scare them off just made them think she was a jealous rival. Cecilia was the only one who could walk into that crowd and calm everyone down with just a few graceful words. She was the glue holding that chaotic mess together. Raven added that she handled almost every single chore behind the scenes. She managed the party's budget, did the recon with Makana, and basically fixed every mess Yuga made. Yoki was getting visibly annoyed, feeling like they were using her as a personal maid, but Makana defended Yuga, saying his trouble always came from trying to help people. Still, Yoki didn't care about Yuga's good heart. He wanted to hear more about his girl. As they were wrapping up, Makana was about to reveal Cecilia's secret nickname, but the air suddenly turned cold. Cecilia appeared right behind her, looking like a literal goddess of vengeance. She was not happy about her personal life being broadcasted like a radio show. She dragged Makana away for a private talk about boundaries, leaving the guys in a very awkward silence. Raven, fearing for his life, refused to tell Yoki the nickname, but he offered a compromise. He invited Yoki to an orphanage in the city where they often volunteer. When they got there, a crowd of kids rushed out shouting for the cold-blooded swordsman. Yoki found it hilarious that such an edgy name stuck to the shy Raven, but then he heard it. One of the kids asked, "Is the Holy Mother coming today?" Bingo. That had to be the nickname. Later, Raven explained that his own nickname came from the fact that he never speaks in battle, making him look like a heartless killing machine. But when it came to Cecilia's nickname, he told Yoki that if he really wanted to know why she hates it, he'd have to ask her himself. Yoki, feeling inspired, decided that the best way to bond was through shared trauma. I mean, a mission. He convinced Cecilia to go on a quest with him, but Raven bailed at the last second, sending Makana as a replacement. Makana immediately saw through Yoki's plan. When Yoki said he wanted to solo all the monsters to look cool, Makana nearly lost it. She told him that sidelining her is the fastest way to kill the mood. If he wanted to bond, they needed to fight side by side. A few moments later, Cecilia arrived with Happiness in tow, and they headed to a haunted mansion filled with undead. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with mana and cobwebs. When the first wave of skeletons crawled out of the floor, Cecilia didn't hesitate. She unleashed her Holy Ring spell, and I'm telling you, it was like watching a masterclass. The skeletons didn't even have time to rattle before turning into literal dust. Yoki played his part too, using water magic to freeze the enemies in place so Cecilia could finish them off effortlessly. Yoki was being surprisingly attentive, making sure she took breaks and stayed hydrated. Makana was actually impressed, seeing that our boy might actually have some Rizz after all. They eventually reached the throne room, where the undead king was sitting all high and mighty. Yoki, thinking he was a total boss, kicked the monster's crown off just to show off. But the undead king didn't counterattack with dark magic. Instead, he started panicking, chasing his crown like a toddler losing a toy. It was so pathetic that Yoki actually felt like the villain of the story for a second. Cecilia, being the saint she is, felt bad for the guy. She realized the crown was the only thing he had left of his past life. So, instead of a standard exorcism, she used a high-level advanced spell to send him to heaven with a VIP pass, allowing him to take his precious crown with him. It was a beautiful moment, but that kind of magic is a massive drain. Cecilia was so exhausted she could barely stand. This was the moment Yoki was waiting for. As they headed back, he offered to help her walk, but her legs completely gave out. Without missing a beat, Yoki swept her off her feet in a perfect princess carry. Cecilia was bright red, protesting that it was embarrassing, but Yoki pointed out that the others were already far ahead. Truth be told, she leaned into it and actually seemed to enjoy the ride. Later, during their usual tea time, Cecilia brought up the orphanage. She knew he had heard the nickname and begged him never to call her Holy Mother. Yoki, being curious, asked why, since it sounds so respectful. Cecilia sighed and explained that back in their adventuring days, Yuga would constantly praise her for her cooking and cleaning, telling everyone she was just like his mother. The name started as a joke and just stuck, and she absolutely hated being the group's mom. Cecilia was dead serious. But Yoki? Our boy couldn't help himself. He burst out laughing, realizing that the great saint of the hero's party was basically traumatized by being a housewife for a bunch of messy adventurers. The scene shifts and we see our protagonist chilling in his room when, out of nowhere, Gar decides to open up and ask for a favor. The lad is all ears as the Stone Guardian reveals his desire to start working. Our hero confesses he was caught off guard by this request from a living statue that technically has no rent to pay or food to buy, but the big guy explains he feels guilty about all the money little Teal spends on him. Every time the girl visits, she brings a massive bag of magicite, and although he doesn't know the exact price, he is certain that it consumes a huge chunk of her salary. The protagonist admires this desire to stop being a freeloader and resolves to help his friend land a job. The first step in this grand plan is registering him as an adventurer, so the boy puts a disguise on the monster and leads him to the guild. To maintain the edgelord aesthetic, the former general himself wears his Shadow Master outfit. When they arrive, the receptionist is understandably terrified, as the two look more like they are about to pull a heist than sign up for quests. The young man assures her that despite the shady appearance, his partner is a good guy, but the employee still calls Clayman over to handle the situation. The Vice Master immediately realizes this is just another one of the hero's stunts, and as long as nobody ends up dead, he doesn't really care, so he just signs the paperwork. Since the newcomer is starting from zero, the protagonist asks for a list of beginner-friendly missions for the following day. On the way back, the Guardian questions why they didn't just take a job right away, and the Master explains that they still need to find a weapon for him. Gar doesn't understand the point since he has magic, but the lad reminds him that he only knows dark magic, and if he used that in public, everyone would instantly know he's a demon. Besides, since the monster has never been out in the city before, the youth takes the opportunity to show him around. The next morning, upon returning to the guild, Clayman mentions that someone is waiting for them in the back. To the young man's surprise, he finds Cecilia wearing a nun outfit. She had heard stories about the boy's alter ego through Sophia, and the more she listened, the more she was sure it was her friend, so she decided to check it out for herself. The hero explains he is teaching his partner the adventurer ropes, and the lady thinks it is a wonderful idea. She even asks if the disguise is to avoid being recognized while helping out, and the boy just agrees, though in reality, he's only wearing the gear for fun. Worried that the protagonist might end up overdoing it due to his theatrical enthusiasm, the priestess decides to tag along on the missions. The first goal of the day is to find a lost cat, but the intensity of the disguised hero ends up scaring the pet owners, who hesitate to speak. The blonde asks him to tone it down and takes over the conversation, securing a sketch of the animal and the information that it went missing a week ago. Gar asks about the next step, and while the normal procedure would be to interview neighbors, the protagonist decides to use a much faster and more stylish method. He leaps into the air and begins running across the rooftops while applying lightning magic to his entire body to cover as much ground as possible. Using the owner's scent, he locates the cat in moments, but notices the animal is accompanied by a second feline. The creature seems hostile, so the lad uses magic to put it to sleep and returns both to the owners. They are grateful but confused by the extra cat. The ex-general explains that the two were together, and now that is their problem to handle. With the first task done, the hero wants to jump to the next one, but his beloved interrupts him. She reminds him that the goal is to teach the rookie, and there is no learning if the master does a speed run of everything. So she suggests letting the stone monster handle the herb gathering on his own. The boy warns his friend not to overdo it, and to leave enough behind for other adventurers. After that, the challenge is to defeat a group of goblins. The protagonist fears the partner might not handle the combat, but discovers the big guy is a master at swinging a hammer, eliminating the creatures without any struggle. Back at the guild, Gar receives his first payment and is radiant with joy for finally earning his own money, swearing to work hard to repay everything Teal has done for him. The Guardian states he wants to try doing missions solo the next day to see if he really got the hang of it, and despite the worry, the couple decides to trust him. Since they won't be helping their friend, the lad prepares to say goodbye to the saint, but she asks about his plans. He explains he needs to maintain his alter ego's reputation and is heading out on an A-rank mission. To his surprise, the blonde offers to go with him. The youth hesitates because the job requires a few days of travel and he knows she is busy, but the girl guarantees her schedule is clear. In truth, he is just nervous because this will be the first time the two of them will travel completely alone. The saint grabs her travel gear, a long outfit that hides her identity as a member of the hero party to avoid being swarmed by crowds. The next day, they set out to investigate jungle ruins. The protagonist questions why something so simple as A-rank, and the lady explains that not everything is about fighting powerful monsters. The location is remote, with no nearby villages to rest and no established paths, requiring camping and a strong sense of direction, along with extreme care not to damage anything since the client is an archaeologist. When it gets dark, they set up camp, and the boy enters a state of internal panic for being alone with her in the middle of the forest. To keep his cool, he uses his alter ego as a shield and enters ultra try-hard mode, creating a giant barrier around the area and gathering enough fruit for the entire journey in just a few minutes. The saint thinks that is kind of him, but asks him to take off the mask, as it is annoying to talk to a helmet when it is just the two of them. The youth tries to make an excuse, but notices she is getting upset and finally gives in. The girl is happy to see him face to face and serves a bowl of soup she prepared herself. The flavor is incredible, and the hero praises her culinary skills, which makes her smile in a way that leaves him all flustered again, forcing him to put the helmet back on to calm down. He suggests they go to sleep soon, leaving the girl disappointed as she wanted to talk a little longer. While they try to sleep, the blonde cannot stop thinking about a conversation she had with the king before the trip. The monarch informed her that the ruler of a neighboring domain had asked for her hand in marriage. She intended to refuse because she wasn't ready for a commitment, but the king assumed she already had her eye on our protagonist, which left her embarrassed, though she didn't deny it. The sovereign accepted the decision, but warned her that the man in question does not take rejection easily and that she should be careful. The next morning, they reach the ruins and the girl suggests staying on the front line to immobilize monsters carefully, fearing the lad's power would destroy everything. He guarantees he has subtle spells and that, because he can sense enemies beforehand, he should lead the way. They move forward, and the boy detects exactly 13 monsters in a room. The saint is impressed by the precision, but doesn't know how to immobilize so many at once. She suggests going around, but the protagonist uses an illusion spell that attracts all the rats and bats. He covers his beloved's eyes so she isn't affected, and they pass through peacefully. She asks about the magic, and he explains that the illusion shows the target their deepest desire, making it impossible to look away. The youth thinks that if he looked, he would see the image of the saint, but wonders what she would see. For a moment, he thinks she might be thinking of him, but discovers she was only thinking about cake. They continue, and the hero realizes the place is just a bunch of empty rooms and plants, feeling disappointed that there isn't anything cool to see. At least the view from the site was amazing. Back at the guild, they turn in the detailed report and receive a great reward. The lad suggests they celebrate together, but first they stop by his room so he can change. When they arrive, they find Teal lying on the floor, devastated because she came to see the gargoyle and he has been gone for 4 days. She begs for news, and luckily, the big guy appears at that moment returning from his adventure. The girl jumps into his arms and the monster apologizes for not giving her a heads up, explaining that he is now an adventurer and worked those days so he wouldn't be a burden to her. The little one says she works by her own choice, but the guardian insists he will keep putting in the effort to repay everything she does. Everything kicks off sometime after our last set of adventures, when the big guy Duke shows up to ask our protagonist for some urgent help. The reason for the visit? Our favorite redhead swordsman Raven has been in a deep depression lately, and nobody seems to know what's going on with the guy. The former general takes one look at his friend and immediately cracks the case. It's a classic textbook instance of lovesickness. He asks the redhead if this heavy mood has anything to do with happiness, and the guy's immediate reaction tells him everything he needs to know. We find out that the poor guy hasn't had many chances to see his beloved lately, so our hero suggests organizing a fake quest as an excuse to invite Cecilia and the Harpy, just like they did last time. However, Duke shuts that down immediately and drops some real talk, asking why they don't just ask the girls out on a date like normal people. The mere thought of an actual date sends both the protagonist and Raven into a state of absolute shock. But, thanks to Duke's persistence, they eventually find the courage to invite the girls out for a double date. To round out the group, the big man even invites one of his female knight friends. Our former general is stunned because he had no idea his subordinate even had a girlfriend, but the big guy clears things up by saying that isn't the case at all. Irene just happened to hear that he was trying to help his two friends and said she wanted to tag along to see how things would play out. With the team assembled, the group starts moving, and the first stop of the day is a place our harpy maid has been dying to visit. Duke mentions that it's a famous tourist spot that recently opened, and as soon as the redhead hears that, he realizes exactly where they are headed and panics, desperately trying to convince the girl to go anywhere else instead. The priestess can see that her friend is dying of embarrassment at the idea of going there, so she tries to help out by saying the place must be way too crowded, but that only serves to make our protagonist and Happiness even more curious, sending the two of them running inside. A few minutes later, they arrive at a display featuring statues of every member of the hero's party. It was set up to celebrate the defeat of the Demon Lord and should be a massive honor, but the redhead thinks the whole thing is incredibly embarrassing. The harpy tells him there's no need for shame because he accomplished a great feat, and she confesses that she is actually quite proud of him. A little while later, everyone sits down in the park to have some ice cream, and our hero and Duke both smile at each other, glad to see their friend having so much fun. At one point, the girl gets a bit of ice cream on her cheek, and when the redhead tells her about it, she leans over so he can take care of it for her. It had all the makings of a super sweet Rizz moment, but then a group of knights suddenly shows up after overhearing the captain's voice. They all start mocking the lad for having what they consider a girly voice, especially the vice captain, who is a total jerk. When Happiness tries to stand up for him, they mock him even more, saying he's so weak he needs a girl to protect him. The guys eventually leave, but the emotional damage has already been done, and the swordsman's pride is left in shambles, causing him to run off without saying a single word to anyone. The protagonist and Duke run after him and follow him into a dead-end alleyway. Our hero understands why the friend is upset, but he didn't expect such a drastic flight response. They eventually find the guy sitting on some discarded boxes, but Duke isn't in the mood to deal with the drama and simply turns around to walk away, leaving the dirty work of counseling to the former general. The lad takes a seat next to his friend and asks him to explain what's really hurting. The redhead confesses that lately he has been constantly reminded of how weak he truly feels. He recalls the ocean mission they did together and mentions that Happiness told him she had a massive secret she was keeping. She didn't force him to tell her anything back then because he seemed scared, but now he realizes there is no way he can expect her to trust him with her vulnerabilities when he has done nothing but run away from his own problems. He admits that sometimes he wishes he could be straightforward and courageous like our protagonist, but the youth drops some truth and says he is nowhere near as brave as the friend thinks he is. He confesses that the one time he was alone with Cecilia for 3 days straight, he had to hide behind an edgelord mask just to keep his cool, but says that's beside the point right now. The hero affirms that he has faith in the redhead, as do his beloved and Duke, so he should value himself more because he's much stronger than he realizes. The redhead thanks him for the pep talk because it really lifted his spirits, and now, feeling better, he is finally ready to return to the group. Shortly after, the two rejoin the girls, and the swordsman immediately apologizes for running off like that. The harpy says she doesn't mind, and since everyone is back on the same page now, Duke suggests they all go shopping together. As they walk, the redhead turns to the girl and tells her that he knows she might not be able to rely on him right now, but he is going to work harder so he can become the kind of man she can entrust with her deepest secret. Hearing him say that makes the girl feel guilty for still hiding the truth. A few days later, the priestess comes running to our protagonist in a panic because happiness has simply vanished. She left a request for extended leave, but the note she left behind is so confusing that the blonde doesn't know what to make of it. The protagonist, Duke, and the gargoyle all take a look at the letter, and it definitely looks like something written by the harpy, but it makes no sense at all. All it says is that they should come find her in the forest in a month, and now that they think about it, they have a good idea of which forest she's talking about. However, they aren't willing to wait an entire month, so our hero heads out with the others to track her down using his enhanced demon sense of smell. They eventually find the girl hiding behind a wall on the outskirts of the city and tell her she can't just run away out of the blue like that, but she responds that she trusted them to find her. They ask her to come clean, and she explains that she wants to tell Raven the whole truth about being a demon. The others ask her if she is absolutely sure about this, as there are no guarantees that the knight will accept her, but she insists she doesn't want to live a lie anymore. Duke reminds her that she isn't the only one who might be affected by the truth, because if the redhead doesn't accept her being a demon, he might not only arrest her, but also look into her relationships and uncover the truth about all of them as well. The girl pleads with the big guy, saying she isn't trying to cause trouble for her friends, but the subordinate already knows that. He is certain she thought this through before making the decision and tells her that if her conviction is that strong, there's no need to worry about them because they all have her back no matter what. Meanwhile, back in the city, the swordsman is on his way to Knight headquarters when he crosses paths with the vice captain and his gang. The guy starts mocking the redhead's voice yet again, but this time the lad stands his ground and asks what gives the vice captain the right to speak to his captain in such a manner. The jerk is stunned because he really wasn't expecting the redhead to defend himself, and the look in the warrior's eyes is absolutely terrifying. The coward immediately falls to his knees and begs the captain for forgiveness. The redhead drops a note saying that's better and walks off with total main character energy. 1 month later, our protagonist and the priestess are having tea together, and with happiness's absence already lasting 30 days, the blonde starts to feel like her friend might be preparing to reveal her wings to her beloved. The lad says she is probably right and that Duke is likely telling Raven where to find her at this very moment. Shortly after, the hero leaves, and as he walks away, the priestess's mother appears. Aqua is disappointed she didn't get a chance to talk to her potential son-in-law before he left, but she asks her daughter if she has told him about the marriage proposal yet. The saint says she hasn't mentioned anything yet because the youth is too busy helping his friends, but the mother questions if she is sure she wants to keep him out of it, especially since the proposed future husband has already arrived in the city. The blonde says she just intends to meet the man and politely decline the engagement, so there's no need to involve the protagonist, and specifically asks her mother not to tell him. Aqua agrees to keep the secret, but teases her daughter, saying the fact that she doesn't want the boy to find out only proves she sees him as much more than a simple friend, and the girl can't even argue against it. Finally, our hero ends up running into Raven waiting outside his house, and he looks very disturbed by something. As soon as the redhead notices the protagonist, he throws a feather at his feet. The lad recognizes it instantly as one of Happiness's feathers, so he demands to know what's going on, but the redhead simply orders him to follow. Continuing this drama, our former general decides to play along and follows Raven deep into the forest. But as soon as they are far enough away from civilization, the redhead spins around and draws his sword. The lad had feared something like this might happen, but he didn't imagine his friend would take things this far after learning the truth about his identity. The swordsman lunges forward with everything he has, but the protagonist counters with a magic-infused punch and demands to know what the warrior has done with our harpy maid. The redhead claims he hasn't done anything to her and is simply there to punish the lad for hurting Happiness before. Now, that is a bold move, considering he knows full well he is dealing with that same powerful demon from before. This means the knight is fully aware that the protagonist could finish him off in the blink of an eye if he wanted to. To give the redhead his due credit, he really has gotten much stronger since the last time they faced off. In fact, he is powerful enough to force the former general to reveal his true form. However, our hero still outclasses him in raw strength, and before long, the knight ends up lying motionless on the ground. The protagonist makes it crystal clear that his opponent doesn't stand a chance, and since he apparently hasn't hurt the girl, the lad doesn't want to continue with this senseless fight. Except the redhead refuses to give up. The youth asks the reason for such persistence, and the swordsman explains that he promised happiness he would give the lad a beating for forcing the girl to pluck out all her feathers when she disguised herself as a human. Hearing this petty reason makes the former general absolutely furious, as he cannot believe his friend seriously challenged him over something so trivial. He kicks the sword out of the redhead's hand and steps on the blade to stop him from grabbing it back. Since he knows the harpy must be hiding nearby, he yells for her to show herself before he goes hunting for her himself. A moment later, the girl emerges from behind a pair of trees, and after the protagonist gives them both a massive scolding, they end up apologizing for their crazy plan. The lad decides to let it slide for now, but asks if they at least managed to resolve things between them. The redhead confirms they did, and explains that earlier, Duke had taken him to a certain part of the forest. There, he found his beloved hiding at the top of a tree. The knight approached and asked what she was doing up there, and she explained that this was the place where it all started for her, so she thought it appropriate to reveal the truth there. The swordsman didn't get what she meant right away, but before he could finish speaking, the girl descended from the tree in her full harpy form. She confessed that she likes the lad very much and would want to stay by his side forever, but she didn't want to live in a lie anymore, which is why she is showing her true identity. The redhead walked up to her and apologized for not realizing she was suffering so much. He stated that he doesn't care that she is a demon because he loves her, and the girl replied that she feels the same, so they agreed to stay together. Our protagonist is happy, but also feels that little sting of jealousy seeing how well their relationship is going, on top of being irritated because, right after such a sweet moment, the harpy asked her boyfriend to beat him up. As punishment for this foolishness, the youth uses a chain-binding spell to tie the redhead right on top of the girl, and warns that they can have all the fun they want there, because they are going to be stuck that way for the next few hours. However, he isn't totally heartless, so he puts up a barrier around them to keep monsters away and block out any external noise. After that, the hero goes back to Cecilia's house, and after recounting everything that happened, says he is relieved it all worked out, because if the knight had rejected his subordinate, she would have been forced to leave the city. The priestess is happy for her friends, but it is hard for her to show joy right now because her head is full of problems. She tells the lad she is going to be very busy for a while and won't be able to hang out with him, and the youth says that's fine, since he was planning on leaving town for a period. The blonde is shocked, but the lad explains that Yuga asked for help on a mission, so he will be gone for about 3 weeks taking care of a distant mine. Right at that moment, the redhead and the harpy barge into the saint's room looking for the protagonist and seem absolutely furious. The girl asks if the hero did something to them, but the lad interrupts, saying they deserved it for messing with him first. The couple gets a bit awkward remembering what happened, but they still want revenge and continue chasing the youth. He runs to the window and jumps off the balcony to escape, yelling to the blonde that he will visit her as soon as he returns from the mission. The priestess really wished she could have talked a bit more, as she had a lot to say, but now she will have to wait until next time. Meanwhile, the protagonist is already on the road with Yuga and is hating every second of it because the official hero keeps getting mobbed by crowds of girls wherever they go. To make matters worse, they haven't even reached the mines yet, meaning they still have a long journey ahead of them. Meanwhile, back in the city, the priestess is getting all dolled up to meet her marriage suitor, but she thinks the whole thing is excessive, especially since she plans to give the guy the boot anyway. She comments that she could have worn her normal clothes, however, Sophia insists that as a member of the Aquarina family, the young woman must look impeccable. At that moment, the girl is informed that she has a visitor, and checking in, she finds Makana waiting for her. The mage is jaw-dropped seeing her friend dressed so elegantly. The saint gets worried thinking the outfit is weird, but the sorceress explains that she was just surprised, as she rarely gets the chance to see her partner dressed like a true noble. She asks what the occasion is, and the blonde explains she has an arranged marriage meeting today. At first, the mage doesn't think much of it, but as soon as she processes the information, she panics and asks if her friend is sure she wants to go through with this. The priestess says she is going to meet the guy only because the king ordered it, but she intends to refuse immediately. After all, she is still in training. The sorceress is relieved, but still curious about who the suitor could be. So the blonde reveals that it is one of the heroes from the Duchy of Luminaria, named Soleil. When this guy finally meets our saint, he shows himself to be as charming as can be. He already knows through the king that the girl is not interested in marriage right now, so he says he doesn't have high expectations for the meeting. The lad states he knows her plan is to reject him, and she admits he's right, but he doesn't seem bothered. Instead, he starts talking about how peaceful the world is now, and that all of this is thanks to the work she and the others did in defeating the Demon Lord. The blonde says she doesn't deserve that credit alone, as Yuga was the one who gave the final blow, and she wasn't even present at the battle. However, the lad insists that her contribution was fundamental, and that people like her and the blonde hero deserve to be called heroes. Yet, he makes a qualification, saying that there are some people who are chosen to be heroes solely because of their raw strength, even though they are absolutely rotten inside. So, Soleil starts dropping some major lore and political tea. He brings up Miller, that absolute psychopath hero from the Gallus Empire we saw before, and apparently the guy is finally rotting in a cell for a whole list of devious crimes. Soleil then asks Cecilia if she knows why every nation is so obsessed with having its own personal hero, instead of just picking the absolute best candidate for the job. The answer is as old as time. Even though the demons were a threat to every living soul, the human nations were still too busy trying to prove they were the main characters of the world. Cecilia knows this reality all too well, and being the pure soul she is, she just wishes people would stop the infighting. Soleil claims to feel the exact same way. He mentions that the king must have seen the storm clouds of conflict gathering in the neighboring lands, which is why he even considered Soleil's proposal in the first place. When the priestess asks what he's getting at, he lays out a masterclass in political maneuvering. He explains that a marriage between them wouldn't just be about romance. It would be a loud, clear signal to the world that the Luminaria Duchy and the Kingdom of Clarinus are now an unbreakable alliance. It's a move designed to make any country with bad intentions think twice before attacking. Our girl Cecilia is completely blindsided by this. She can't find a single flaw in his logic, and when Soleil formally proposes to her, framing it as a way to guide the entire world toward a lasting peace, she finds it nearly impossible to just say no. It's a heavy burden to put on her shoulders, honestly. Meanwhile, our boy Yoki is still stuck in the mines with Yuga, and they finally come face to face with the monsters they were sent to exterminate. But here's the kicker, they aren't scary at all. In fact, they are the most adorable bunnies you've ever seen. That is exactly where the problem lies. The miners are so overwhelmed by the cuteness that they're terrified of accidentally hurting one, so they've stopped working entirely. They beg Yuga to handle the situation without shedding a single drop of bunny blood. Yuga, being the typical dense shonen protagonist, agrees instantly with a big smile, but he has absolutely zero plan on how to actually pull it off. He immediately turns to Yoki for a strategy, and you can see Yoki just getting more and more irritated that Yuga is dumping all the brainstorming on him after acting so confident. Back in the city, Soleil is still waiting for an answer. Eventually, Cecilia finds the strength to tell him she just can't do it. The weight of such a massive political responsibility is more than she can handle right now. To his credit, Soleil is a total gentleman and doesn't push the issue, suggesting they put the marriage talk on the back burner for a bit. He shifts the conversation to how he's been living in the countryside lately, claiming that it's vital for nobles to understand the life of commoners to avoid future wars. It's such a noble and high-minded way of thinking that Cecilia is genuinely impressed. As he's leaving, he asks if she'd be willing to show him around the city whenever she has a free moment. She's a bit conflicted, but since she thinks he has good intentions for international relations, she agrees to act as his host. Back at the mine campsite, Yuga decides it's time for some bro talk and asks Yoki for advice. He brings up Cecilia's arranged marriage, and the second those words hit Yoki's ears, he completely loses it. This is the first he's hearing about any of this. Yuga is shocked that Yoki was kept in the dark, and the realization that Cecilia intentionally kept such a massive secret from him starts to eat away at our protagonist. Yuga admits that when he found out, he went straight to her house to demand answers, but she just told him it was the king's order. Yuga clearly hates the idea of her marrying Soleil, especially since the guy is a top-tier noble, a sword master on par with Raven, and basically the most beloved guy in his country. Hearing about this perfect rival sends Yoki into a jealous spiral. He tells Yuga he's on his own with the bunny quest because he has some urgent business to handle. Yoki bolts into the darkness of the night, and once he's far enough away from prying eyes, he sprouts those massive demon wings and takes off toward the city at full speed. A little while later, Manga shows up at the mines because Yuga called for backup, but she is definitely not feeling the vibe when she's greeted by a bunch of shirtless, sweaty miners. Yuga pops out and thanks her for coming, admitting he was lost after Yoki ditched him. When he mentions the marriage talk and how Yoki just vanished, Manga knows exactly why he ran off. She can't help but worry, because an emotional yoki is an unpredictable yoki. Back in the city, Cecilia is fulfilling her promise and showing Soleil around town. Their first stop is the orphanage, and as soon as the kids spot her, they swarm her like she's a rock star. She brought cookies for everyone, and the place is filled with happy shouts and crumbs. While Cecilia is busy playing with the group, one little girl walks up to the handsome Soleil and asks him for uppies, testing his charisma with the toughest audience of all, children. Soleil is standing there looking completely lost because he has no idea what the little girl means by asking for uppies. The blonde priestess has to step in and explain that she just wants him to pick her up and toss her into the air. It's actually kind of heart-wrenching because this is a completely foreign concept to the noble suitor. He never had anyone do that for him when he was a kid. Since the little girl is looking at him with those big eyes, he finally agrees, and she has the absolute time of her life. Seeing how much fun she's having, the rest of the kids swarm him, and he's more than happy to spend the afternoon lifting every single one of them. By evening, the two are heading back in a carriage, and the saintly lady thanks him for taking the time to play. Soleil admits he actually enjoyed it because he had no clue that was how regular children even played. He explains that as the heir of the Grace Hart family, his entire childhood was a mountain of studying and training. Even now, he spends most of his waking hours under his father's strict eye. However, becoming a hero changed everything for him. Seeing the world made him want to protect it from the threat of demons and the destruction caused by nations fighting each other. It's a huge, almost presumptuous goal, but our girl Cecilia tells him she truly admires that dream because she's working toward the same thing. She even mentions that she has a friend, who we all know as our boy Yoki, with incredible power who helps her when things get too tough. She admits she's trying her best to become someone worthy of standing by his side. Hearing her talk about him, Soleil can already tell that this friend must be a top-tier person. When she finally drops him off, he tells her he hopes she can keep showing him the kingdom, and she agrees to meet him again tomorrow. But as soon as she gets home, the saintly lady starts screaming at herself. She realized she was supposed to reject him and never see him again, but instead, she basically went on a full-blown date and even scheduled a second one for the next day. She feels like she's cheating on the former general, even though they aren't official. She remembers his promise to ask her to marry him once he was more established, and that memory made her so happy. But then, the doubt creeps in. She starts wondering if the youth is actually in love with her, or if he only likes her because she was the first human to show him any kindness. Meanwhile, our protagonist finally arrives back at the city. He's planning to use an invisibility spell to sneak into the mansion, but out of nowhere, a massive ball of blue fire shoots him right out of the sky. He hits the ground hard, completely confused about where the attack came from. The answer reveals itself as a man wielding blue flames floats above him, wearing the exact same kind of mask the youth usually uses for his edgelord persona. This blue flame guy is a vigilante on patrol, and he wasn't about to let a demon sneak into the city. Our boy could probably one-shot this guy without breaking a sweat, but he's in a rush to see his girl. However, he stops and realizes he has no plan for what to say once he actually arrives. To make matters worse, the commotion draws the guards. They recognize the vigilante as a wanted criminal, but they are way more terrified of the demon standing near the city walls. They start hurling spears at him out of pure fear. The former general dodges everything easily, but the encounter is a harsh reminder of how much humans truly hate his kind. It makes him question if a future with the priestess is even a possibility. Later that night, Sophia rushes into the girl's room with some urgent news from the guild. When the blonde looks at the paper, she's absolutely horrified. It's a wanted poster featuring a guy in a mask, and she immediately assumes it's her favorite demon. The next morning, the city is on high alert. The Knight's Order is panicking because of the demon sightings. Even though Raven and Duke are pretty sure it was just their boss being himself, they have to follow protocol, so the patrols are doubled. A few minutes later, our protagonist walks through the front gate looking absolutely terrible. The priestess is nearby and sees him covered in scratches, so she runs over to help. The noble suitor tries to stop her, sensing something off about the youth, but she ignores him, insisting that this is her friend. She starts healing his face immediately, but the former general is visibly hesitant to be near her. Just then, the noble walks over to ask who he is. Before the lady can introduce them, the youth cuts her off and claims he's just a random adventurer she helps out from time to time. Hearing that, Soleil relaxes and introduces himself as the man who is trying to marry her. Our hero doesn't even blink. He just apologizes for interrupting their meeting and walks away. But he doesn't get far before Duke and Raven grab him. They are determined to figure out why he's acting so weird and whether or not he's the guy on that wanted poster, and that's where the episode ends, and I must admit that my heart was not ready for this massive reality check hitting our favorite ship. Seeing Yoki start to view himself as a monster and distance himself from Cecilia, right when Soleil is scoring major charisma points, is enough to break any otaku's heart. Did you guys like it and want a continuation? Then let me know in the comments if you want the next part. Smash that like button and the hype to support this video, and subscribe and hit the bell icon so you don't miss any news.